Chapter 677. Auric Territory, William's Castle. After a simple and warm welcome ceremony, William hosted Ouyang Shuo and his party in his marquee mansion, which was now known as William Castle, and did his best to play host. William's castle was built in the style of English castles. The castle was newly built, but one could still feel the weight of history. The entire castle was magnificent, and the interior was beautiful and rich. The two lords were finally able to talk privately at 3 in the afternoon. In reality, William was a member of the royal family, and he had the blood of a noble. Because of this, he had an extraordinary appeal in the English region of the game. Although William was lazy, he was definitely a smart man. After listening to his sister Annie's experience at sea, William confirmed his previous speculation. Ouyang Shuo must have come with a request. There was a big deal between the two territories. What Shanghai City valued in Castle Auric was the steam engine that had just been developed this year. The English region was in the embryonic stage of the Industrial Revolution. The powerful energy of the Industrial Revolution was about to be unleashed, and the source of all this energy was the small steam engine. In order to develop the steam engine, Castle Auric had invested countless resources into it. A conservative estimate would be no less than 2 million gold coins. It had been developed by Gaia a year ago, and gold coins were still extremely precious at that time. Before the steam engine was developed, the entire Castle Auric had to tighten its belt. It was only in the first half of this year that the clouds parted. Therefore, William did not plan to keep the steam engine technology to himself. Instead, he wanted to sell the technology to recover a large amount of liquid funds, so as to speed up the construction of the territory and make up for the shortcomings of the previous construction. After all, the game was different from reality. In the game, the English region was not the only region that could develop the steam engine. The entire European and American countries had no technological bottlenecks in the steam engine technology. He believed that it wouldn't be long before the second and third countries achieved this success. It was no different from a fool's dream for the English region to monopolize the steam engine technology. Since that was the case, it was better to take the opportunity to sell the technology for a good price. In William's eyes, Shanghai City was undoubtedly a good buyer. Putting aside the debt of saving Annie, Shanghai City was wealthy. Secondly, Shanghai City was far from England and would not pose a direct threat to England for a long time. As for pulling up the technological tree of the Eastern countries, it was not within William's consideration. Since the establishment of the Earth Alliance, the prejudice and hostility between the East and the West were no longer as serious as before. What the players were competing for in the game was their own personal interests. The so-called national interest itself was a false proposition. Even if the UK did not sell this technology to China, William believed that the US would definitely sell this technology to their allies in Asia, Japan, and Korea. As such, William did not have any psychological burden. Now, it all depended on what kind of price Shanghai City could offer. In the reception room, Ouyang Shuo didn't beat around the bush and asked directly, "May I ask if you've already developed a steam engine?" "That's right." William nodded. In fact, steam engines had already been fully promoted in the English region. With Shanghai City's powerful intelligence network, William wasn't surprised at all that they would be able to obtain this information. "Are you selling it?" Ouyang Shuo went straight to the point. "The price isn't cheap." William's face showed an expression of wisdom, and it was obvious that he wouldn't be easily swayed. Seeing this, Ouyang Shuo was delighted. As long as the other party was willing to sell it, he didn't lack money. It could be said that the real purpose of Ouyang Shuo's voyage was to buy the technology to manufacture the steam engine. Opening up the Grand Line was just a matter of taking advantage of the situation. If it succeeded, it would be gratifying. This was the only transaction that Ouyang Shuo couldn't afford to lose. If Shanghai City wanted to truly establish its industrial system, it had to break the bottleneck of the China region's technological tree. Otherwise, the 7th Research Institute, with its powerful research team, would often feel powerless in the face of the low technological tree in China. Ouyang Shuo believed that the scientist teams in Handan City and other territories would definitely have the same problem. This was the weakness of the entire China region. If Ouyang Shuo wanted to lead the China region and dominate the future wars, he had to make up for this shortcoming, and he had to do it as soon as possible. As someone who had been reborn, he knew all too well that in his previous life, Japan and Korea had obtained the authorization of the steam engine technology from the United States, which allowed them to rise so quickly. At one time, the powerful China region couldn't even breathe. In this life, Ouyang Shuo wouldn't allow this kind of humiliation to happen again. Therefore, no matter what price he had to pay, Ouyang Shuo was determined to get the steam engine technology. Before going out to sea, Ouyang Shuo had even prepared a backup plan to forcibly seize the technology through the war. Of course, that was only a last resort. From this, one could understand Ouyang Shuo's excitement when he found out that the fleet he saved was Annie's fleet. Needless to say, if there wasn't such a factor, William wouldn't have so readily expressed his willingness to sell the technology. It was normal for it to drag on for a year and a half. By that time, Japan and Korea would have already obtained the authorization of the technology. The changes in the game were so rapid that half a year was enough to open up an order of magnitude of difference. It could only be said that Ouyang Shuo's source of fortune was really starting to make a comeback. 3 million gold coins. Ouyang Shuo started the first round of bidding. Ouyang Shuo wasn't stingy and increased the price bit by bit. The price of 3 million was the result of his repeated considerations. It was basically close to the upper limit of this type of technology authorization. In his previous life, according to the information revealed on the forum, the First Lord of the Japan region, Keisuke Honda, had also spent 3 million gold coins to obtain the steam engine manufacturing technology from the Americans. Of course, that was in the first half of the 4th year of Gaia. In comparison, Ouyang Shuo's price was already very sincere. Brother Wui is indeed generous. William was indeed quite surprised. This price was already very close to his expectations. William was also very satisfied with Ouyang Shuo's straightforwardness. At the end of the day, William was a lazy person and didn't like to haggle back and forth. However, he still had to fight for what he had to fight for. 3 million gold coins could only be said to have reached his lowest expectations. There was still room for more. After all, to a great lord like William, although money was important, it wasn't the most important. Although 3 million gold coins was already an astronomical figure, it wasn't enough to completely move William. Not enough. William shook his head firmly. Add another 1,000 underwater breathing apparatus. Ouyang Shuo was still unhurried. Ouyang Shuo was very tactful and didn't continue to make a fuss about the amount of gold coins. 3 million gold coins was basically a limit. William's so-called not enough naturally meant that he needed other items to make up for it. After all, a transaction was nothing more than a supply and demand relationship. As long as the other party's needs were grasped, there was no need to worry that the other party wouldn't fall for it. The underwater breathing apparatus was undoubtedly such a magical equipment. As long as it was a navy, there was no one who wouldn't covet it. In particular, Shanghai City's successful use of frogman tactics had pushed the underwater breathing apparatus's usefulness to the peak. Whether or not there was a team of frogmen would become one of the standards to measure a navy's rating. Speaking of which, England was the true power in the sea. There is no doubt that Castle Avic was also famous for its navy, so the underwater breathing apparatus was very important. Ouyang Shuo's offer of 1,001 go could be said to be extravagant. It had to be said that William was moved, but the steam engine wasn't a joke. It was a core invention of the first industrial revolution. Especially at this time, selling this technology was also risky for Castle Avic. It's still not enough. William hesitated again and again, but still reluctantly refused. Ouyang Shuo's eyes narrowed. William's greed was somewhat unexpected. It seemed that when they were discussing business, William had already thrown the matter of Shanghai City, saving Annie, to the back of his mind. This person was a little scary when he was rational. Then what if I add this? Ouyang Shuo once again took out a trump card and took out a dragon crystal. Seeing this, William's breathing quickened. There was no other reason than that William was a mage. "This is my limit," Ouyang Shua had to remind William. William nodded. He wasn't really greedy, but there was still a trace of unwillingness in his eyes. He asked, "You should have another dragon crystal, right? Tell me your conditions." "Plus the weaving machine manufacturing technology," Ouyang Shua said with a smile. No, William didn't even think about it and directly refused. One had to know that the loom was another iconic invention of the first industrial revolution. It was enough to revolutionize the entire textile industry and bring about earth-shattering changes. Although the loom wasn't as revolutionary as the steam engine, it was still a treasure. How could William sell such an item at a low price? Ouyang Shua didn't expect William to agree immediately. He continued, "What if I add another 1,000,000 gold coins and 23 Bao 8 bull bed crossbows?" 1,000,000 gold coins was the price difference for repairing the loom. The 3 Bao 8 bull bed crossbows were naturally a special requirement. Hearing this, William's eyes instantly lit up. "Are you talking about the mysterious weapon that you used to kill the giant dragon?" He had heard about the process of the giant dragon being killed by the fleet from Annie. "That's right." Ouyang Shua didn't hide it. "Deal." This time, William's answer was straightforward. "Deal." Ouyang Shua took the initiative to reach out and shook William's hand tightly. He couldn't hide the excitement in his heart. The foundation of Shanghai City and the entire China region had been completely established for the next 3 to 4 years. The China region would no longer suffer the humiliation of being greatly behind in technology. Of course, there was still a gap. Purchasing the steam engine and weaving machine manufacturing technology was only a part of the technological system. In terms of firearms, the Western countries still had a huge technological advantage, waiting for Shanghai City to overcome it. This kind of technology was the most advanced in the United States. Perhaps Ouyang Shua would have to make a trip to America at some point in the future. Chapter 678. Ouyang Shua relaxed after the big deal was settled. He said with a smile, "William, let's make another exchange. Shanghai City will use 3 large fortress ships to exchange for a first-level sailing battleship and 2 third-level sailing battleships." In the Gaia 3 years before ironclad warships became popular, fortress ships and sailing battleships each had their own strengths and weaknesses. Ouyang Shua's intention was naturally to learn from each other and improve the warship manufacturing level of his territory. More importantly, the overall design of the sailing battleship was closer to the design concept of the future ironclad warships. If Shanghai City's shipyard had the sailing battleship as a reference, it would naturally speed up the research of ironclad warships. William was a smart man. He understood immediately and said with a smile, "Sure." He also hoped to use this opportunity to establish a personal friendship with Ouyang Shua. The scene of the 2 giants of the East and the West working hand in hand was something to look forward to. Next, they discussed the details of the deal. The 2 giants finally reached an agreement at around 6 in the evening. This was a huge deal. Shanghai City spent a total of 4,000,000 gold coins, 1,000 underwater breathing devices, 23 Bao 8 bull crossbows, 2 dragon crystals, and 3 large fortress ships in exchange for Castle Avic steam engine manufacturing technology, weaving technology, and 3 sailing battleships. At the same time, William agreed to sponsor 12 mechanical engineers and 15 textile technicians to cooperate with Shanghai City in completing the transformation of the 2 technologies. The deal was completed, and everyone was happy. William obtained sufficient funds for the construction, while Ouyang Shua obtained the technology he had been dreaming of. As a result, the funds in Ouyang Shua's storage bag shrunk by half. When he defeated the Spanish invincible fleet, Ouyang Shua's funds reached 11,000,000 gold coins. The construction of the base cities, including the establishment of the Mediterranean fleet, had consumed close to 1,000,000 gold coins. He earned another 2,000,000 gold coins from the auction on the sea. Ouyang Shua's personal wealth had accumulated to 12,000,000 gold coins. After the deal with William was completed, it became 8,000,000 gold coins, which had shrunk by a third. Of course, it was all worth it. That night, William held a grand banquet in the largest banquet hall of the castle. It was to welcome Ouyang Shuo and his party, and also to celebrate the huge deal they had reached in the afternoon. The next day, both parties started to fulfill the contract. William handed Ouyang Shuo two booklets, the steam engine manufacturing technical manual and the weaving machine manufacturing technical manual. Ouyang Shuo took them and felt that they were heavy. In addition, William had given him 5 additional prototypes. It was only when the bulk of the goods were delivered that the others in Castle Auric found out about this shocking transaction. Shanghai City is indeed the wealthiest city in the world. As expected of the wealthiest city in the world. Someone exclaimed, "I don't think it's a good idea to sell the steam engine and loom to the Easterners." There were also those who had doubts, but the deal had already been settled. No one could change it, so they could only complain. No matter what, we finally have money. The territory's treasurer was the most excited. As they discussed, the trade continued. It was not until 5 in the afternoon that the delivery of the batches of goods was completed. The hardest part was naturally the delivery of the battleship. The British sailing battleships were still fine, as they could be delivered directly from the shipyard. Shanghai City's fortress ship, on the other hand, had to move the supplies to the sailing battleship. In just one afternoon, the news of the deal between the two giants had spread throughout the UK, and even some European countries had received the news. As such, it naturally caused another wave of commotion. There were those who wanted to crusade against England for betraying Europe, while there were those who were envious and even envious. Even in the middle of Gaia's 3rd year, 4,000,000 gold coins was still a huge sum of money to a lord. Moreover, the territories of the European countries were generally smaller, so this sum of money was even heavier. The rise of Castle Auric was unstoppable. At the same time, the European lords began to accelerate the development of the steam engine. The first industrial revolution was about to completely erupt throughout Europe. August 20th, Dragonhead. After the transaction was completed, the fleet did not stay in Plymouth Harbor for long and immediately set off for home. The fleet had lost 3 fortress ships and gained 3 sailing battleships. Using this opportunity, the Shanghai City Navy, including the sailors, familiarized themselves with the performance and operation of the sailing battleships under the guidance of Castle Auric's engineers. At a normal sailing speed, it would take at least 2 months for the fleet to successfully return to Shanghai City, even if there were no delays along the way. By then, it would be too late, and the 6th battle would have already begun. Therefore, Ouyang Shuo had to quickly return to Shanghai City. As for the specific method, Ouyang Shuo had already thought of it before setting out to sea. In fact, if everything went smoothly, the entire fleet did not even need to set off for home. Some of the rules in the game, if used properly, could sometimes produce miraculous effects. In the war room, Ouyang Shuo was having a secret discussion with Zheng He. Lead the fleet back to Bay City and wait for further instructions. What about you, Marquis? Zheng, he was puzzled. Tonight, I will return to Shanghai City using a mystic technique. Don't worry. Understood. Zheng, he nodded. The NPCs were already aware of the wonders of mutants. The mystic technique that Ouyang Shuo mentioned was the special item obtained on Gaia's 2nd year's eve, the Yin-Yang copper coin. Yin-Yang copper coin. After using it, one could be resurrected without losing any damage. With this protection, Ouyang Shuo could directly commit suicide and complete his reincarnation in Shanghai City. Without hesitation, Ouyang Shuo took off his equipment and placed it in his storage bag. The so-called non-losing reincarnation only meant that he would not lose his level, internal strength, skills, achievement points, and other attributes. After death, his equipment would still drop. Therefore, to avoid trouble, he had to keep his equipment. Immediately after, Ouyang Shuo did not hesitate to kill himself with his sword. After a while, his corpse disappeared from Dragonhead's secret chamber. At the same time, Ouyang Shuo slowly walked out of Shanghai City's reincarnation hall thousands of miles away. He had already put on all the equipment he had taken off. Marquis, the Imperial guards in charge of guarding the reincarnation hall were shocked speechless when they saw Ouyang Shuo. The soldier knew that the reincarnation hall was not a good place for mutants. Anyone who walked out of this place was someone who had died once. Don't panic. I'm fine. Yes. The soldier bowed reflexively. In the Imperial Guards, Ouyang Shuo was the absolute supreme existence. The Imperial Guards would not have any doubts about the Marquis's words. Ouyang Shuo's sudden return caused a huge uproar in Shanghai City. The entire city was in an uproar because of the Marquis's return. Over the past half a year, the achievements that the Marquis had made under the leadership of the Ocean Fleet had long been publicized by Xiao He and the others. In the eyes of the people, the Marquis was already a reclusive overlord. Within the Wei Jiasi, Ouyang Shuo's prestige in the territory had reached its peak. In less than 2 hours, the news of Ouyang Shuo's return to Shanghai City had spread throughout the entire China region. Everyone knew what they needed to know. Handan City, the Lord's mansion. Has the old fox returned? Di Chen's eyes were deep. No one knew when, but the Yin-Huang alliance had changed the way they addressed Ouyang Shuo to the old fox. Peerless elegance grinned. I'm afraid the China region will not be peaceful again. Yes, he's a troublemaker. Peerless elegance suddenly thought of something and smiled. I wonder how the old fox will feel when he finds out about the recent achievements of the Yin-Huang alliance. Feel? Di Chun raised an eyebrow. Compared to his international reputation, our achievements are nothing. I'm afraid he won't even care about us. Don't belittle yourself, Peerless elegance advised. Di Chun shook his head, his expression desolate. I'm not belittling myself. Do you know that the latest news from Imperial Wind shows that the old fox has already bought England's steam engine technology? Do you think he will share this technology with Shanghai Alliance? Peerless elegance thought deeper. Maybe. Di Chun was not sure. If it was him, he would definitely not share it with his allies. But that person was different. He never did things logically and was always unexpected. It has to be said that in terms of breadth of mind, Di Chun could not compare. If that's the case, then the results of our hard work for half a year will be greatly discounted. Di Chun was indifferent. That can't be helped. Who asked us to not have the ability to go out to sea? I heard that Xiongba has been vigorously developing the Navy. Peerless elegance observed Di Chun's expression and continued. I heard that Xiongba and the old fox are quite close. Now that the old fox has returned, who knows what Xiongba will do? Hearing this name, Di Chun could not help but frown. Let him be. In the end, Di Chun did not say anything. If the Yin-Huang alliance only felt fear towards Ouyang Shuo's return, then the Yunnan city-state felt fear towards Ouyang Shuo's return. For the past half a year, the Shanghai City Dragon Stallion Army stationed at the border of the Yunnan province, under the command of Bai Qi, had been carrying out all kinds of military exercises. At the same time, the army of Lingxi City and the Dragon Stallion Army frequently interacted. Both sides' spies went in and out of Yunnan province's territory, almost covering the entire Yunnan province. Their intentions were self-evident. There had long been rumors that the Dragon Stallion Army had been preparing to attack Yunnan city-state. The reason why they had not started the war was to cooperate with Shanghai City's policy of resting and recuperating. Did Ouyang Shuo's sudden return mean that Shanghai City's dormancy had temporarily come to an end? This ferocious tiger was about to bare its fangs again and choose its prey. The first to bear the brunt was undoubtedly the Yunnan city-state. As such, how could the lords of Yunnan city-state not be anxious and fearful? An emergency meeting of the 4 city-states was already imminent. Chapter 679. As soon as Ouyang Shuo returned, he stirred the nerves of the entire China region. The Southern Border Protectorate was also very lively. After half a year, Ouyang Shuo had finally returned home. His beloved sister and his recently married wife were here. Only where there were relatives, there was home. Big brother. Binger ran over and stood in front of Ouyang Shuo with her hands behind her back. Her eyes sparkled with boundless youthfulness. Only half a year had passed, and the little girl had grown into a slender and elegant woman. Ouyang Shuo sighed inwardly. The little girl who ran into his arms like a little monkey the moment she saw him had been baptized by time and would never return. He wanted to pat the little girl's head, but his right hand paused in the air and drew an arc in the air before landing on the girl's shoulder. I haven't seen you for half a year, and you're already as tall as Big Brother's shoulder. Really? The little girl leaned over and said in a crisp voice. She raised her right hand above her head and moved it horizontally to Ouyang Shua's shoulder, but it was only a few centimeters away. Just a little bit more. There was not a trace of regret in the girl's voice. She wrapped her arms around her brother and hugged him tightly. Big Brother, Binger missed you, the girl murmured. Ouyang Shua was stunned. His eyes flashed as his right hand naturally touched the girl's head. Time seemed to stop at this moment. The relationship between the brother and sister was pure, like a jar of fine wine. The longer it was, the more mellow it became. Big Brother, did you bring me a gift? The girl raised her head with a crafty look in her eyes. Ouyang Shua smiled, retrieving an exquisite European-style wooden box. This was something he had specially prepared for Bing. Other than a pair of communication conches, there was also an underwater breathing apparatus, a blue magnetic ore, and a ruby the size of a pigeon's egg. All of them were extremely rare items. So beautiful. Binger opened the wooden box and was immediately attracted by the blue magnetic ore. It was a pure blue, mysterious, and noble. Binger raised her pretty head with an excited expression. Big Brother, quickly put on for me. However, she was smart enough to notice at a glance that the blue magnetic ore in the box was the same as the purple magnetic ore hanging around her brother's neck. Okay, this magnetic ore was something that Ouyang Shua had specifically asked Queen Kalia of Atlantis for. It was a top-grade blue magnetic ore, and it was very beneficial to one's cultivation. Even the chain tied to the magnetite stone was woven with a very special kind of wormwood from Atlantis. It was then soaked in a secret potion for 49 days to help stabilize the mind. Since Binger was practicing the Spotless Heart Sutra, it would come in handy. Even if one did not cultivate, wearing this gem for a long time would also nourish one's appearance. To a woman, it was undoubtedly the most irresistible thing. Therefore, Ouyang Shua prepared one for each of Songjia, Sun Xiaoya, Mulan Yue, Yingyu, and Qing Er. For this, he owed Kalia a big favor. After all, the blue magnetite ore was a rare item. In his previous life, the magnetite ore produced by Atlantis had been pushed to sky-high prices. A top-notch, top-grade blue magnetic ore was auctioned for as much as 500,000 gold coins. Big Brother, what is this conch for? That's a fun game, just like a phone in real life. Ouyang Shua explained with a smile. So magical. Each item made the little girl exclaim in surprise. She was very satisfied with the gifts her big brother had carefully prepared. While the siblings were talking, Song Jia stood at the side and watched quietly with a smile. Binger was a clever little girl. She closed the wooden box in satisfaction and said with a smile, Big Brother, I'll be leaving first. You can accompany sister-in-law. As she spoke, she deliberately looked at Song Jia. Ouyang Shua shook his head. She was still young, but full of mischief. Madam, this is for you. Ouyang Shua took out a wooden box of the same style, but the model was slightly larger. I don't agree to ordinary gifts, Song Jia deliberately said as she slowly opened the wooden box. Instantly, the light of the treasure shone everywhere. The most eye-catching thing was not the blue magnetic ore, but a pear-shaped white diamond that weighed 150 carats. The entire diamond was flawless and dazzling. If one had a little understanding of diamonds, they would be able to see that this diamond was exactly the same as the Debyear's Millennium Star in real life, except that it was 50 carats lighter. No matter how experienced and knowledgeable Song Jia was, she subconsciously covered her mouth in the face of such a rare diamond. Her eyes flashed with an irresistible infatuation. This kind of irrational infatuation was too rare in Song Jia. As expected, women had no resistance to diamonds at all. Ouyang Shua smiled and personally put the diamond necklace on Song Jia. A diamond matches a beauty. As expected, only Madame is worthy of this diamond. Just this diamond alone cost Ouyang Shua a total of 100,000 gold coins. One had to know that diamonds in the game were purely decorative and did not have any attributes. Of course, the significance of a diamond had already surpassed the value of its attributes. Song Jia could not bear it anymore. She hugged Ouyang Shuo and gave him a kiss in front of everyone. At this moment, a report came from outside the door. Princess Yingyu and Princess Qin Yang have arrived. Greetings, big brother. The two entered the hall and bowed with their hands clasped in front. Sit down and talk. Ouyang Shuo smiled and took out the gifts he had prepared for them. Every gift was carefully chosen by Ouyang Shuo, and they were all different. The one for Yingyu was a huge sapphire, while the one for Qing Er was an emerald. Apart from that, there were also some unique trinkets. Of course, Qing Er's was the most special. It was a big wooden box filled with dragon skins. The conversation between siblings was naturally joyful and harmonious. During the banquet that night, Ouyang Shuo declined Xiao He's suggestion to meet the officials. He only arranged a table of family banquets in the backyard to reminisce about their reunion. As for government affairs, they would naturally discuss them later. August 21st, Everlasting Palace. The morning sun shone through the thin screen window and into the bedroom of the palace. It was a warm night with hibiscus curtains. Ouyang Shuo kissed his wife, whose face was still flushed, and got out of bed. Since the start of the game, he had never slept in even once, but he was already used to it. As for Song Jia, she was still sleeping soundly after being tormented by Ouyang Shuo last night. On the free Dragon Island, after being baptized by the spiritual energy of the dragon vein, Ouyang Shuo suddenly discovered that his desire had suddenly become intense. Dragons were lustful by nature. It was not just a saying. During the voyage, Ouyang Shuo had no choice but to bitterly endure. After returning to Shanghai City, he could not control himself and kept asking for more and more. In the latter half of the night, Song Jia could no longer bear it. She begged and gasped for breath. Only then did he give up. After leaving the palace, Ouyang Shuo went to the study room. There was a stack of memorials on the desk. Needless to say, they were placed there by the secretary, Lang by Nanpu. In the past, these memorials were handed over to the 4 bureau chiefs for approval. Now that the Marquis had returned, it was back to normal. However, Ouyang Shuo was not in the mood to flip through the memorials. He directly summoned Black Snake. Tell me, have there been any major changes in the China region in the past 6 months? Ouyang Shuo asked. Black Snake nodded and reported in a clear and organized manner. He was already prepared. In fact, Black Snake was not the only one who was prepared. The various officials of the Protectorate of the Southern Border basically did not rest last night. They were all preparing for the report. It was obvious that when the Marquis returned, he would definitely look for them first. The Black Snake Guards were in charge of domestic and foreign intelligence, especially against the players. Naturally, they were the first to be called by Ouyang Shuo. There should not be any major deviation in the construction of the territory. If there were any changes, it could only be the other lords of the China region. Sure enough, Ouyang Shuo's premonition was right. The first piece of news that Black Snake reported was about Izhou Island. When Ouyang Shuo presided over the construction of Somalia's Friendship City, dragon-seeking acupuncture point was still fighting with Xiongba for Izhou Island and had the upper hand. However, the final result left everyone dumbfounded. After defeating the Overlord City's navy, dragon-seeking acupuncture point was still too careless and did not take any precautions on the island. As a result, they were ambushed by the Overlord City's army, who had quietly landed on the island. Less than 10,000 of the dragon-seeking acupuncture point's army survived. After this battle, dragon-seeking acupuncture point became somewhat unable to recover. Not only did they lose Izhou Island, but they also watched the cooked duck fly away. Even in Minnan Province, dragon-seeking acupuncture point's army could not control the situation. The current Minnan Province was in a chaotic period. During this period, dragon-seeking acupuncture point had personally rushed to Shanghai City to ask for reinforcements, but was tactfully rejected by Song Jia. At that time, dragon-seeking acupuncture point's expression was somewhat ugly. Black Snake glanced at the Marquis opposite him and said cautiously, "According to the spy's report, The Lord of Dragons seeking acupuncture point has privately complained about the Marquis several times during this period in the territory. Hearing this, Ouyang Shua's eyes flashed with a sharp and threatening aura. Go on. Ouyang Shua was expressionless. Ouyang Shua believed that since Black Snake said so, he would not speak without thinking. Instead, he had solid information. This also meant that there was finally a real crack in the Mountain and Sea Alliance. People would change. In his previous life, dragon-seeking acupuncture point was only a somewhat successful lord. How could he have today's glory? Once people stood at a high place for a long time and got used to it, it was inevitable that they would become a little complacent. Dragon-seeking acupuncture point had forgotten who brought him to such a peak step by step. Or did dragon-seeking acupuncture point think that he had fought for the position of dragon-seeking acupuncture point? Not long ago, the Black Snake Guards received a tip-off that the Lord of Dragons seeking acupuncture point might be in contact with a mysterious force. As for the specifics, because it is too confidential, we can't confirm it. Black Snake dropped another heavy bomb. Ouyang Shua's eyes narrowed. Could it be the Yin-Huang Alliance? We can't rule out this possibility, but we can't conclude it either. Black Snake chose his words carefully. There's another possibility, or a third party is involved. Phew. Ouyang Shua took a deep breath and said calmly, Investigate. Investigate it for me. Yes, sir. Remember, before the investigation is completed, do not beat the grass and alert the enemy. Ouyang Shua specially reminded. As for some complaints, we can still tolerate it. Do not be prejudiced because of it. Understood. Chapter 680. Ouyang Shua was in a bad mood because of the matter of finding the dragon acupoint. This was the way of the world. When the alliance of mountains and seas was first established, they were still small lords with ideals, passion, and fighting spirit. Today, they had already achieved success and recognition. Greed grew uncontrollably, and infighting and disagreements were inevitable. The lessons of history were profound. In reality, how many entrepreneurial teams had a good start and a good end? In the end, it was inevitable that they would part ways and even become enemies. The alliance of mountains and seas seemed to be unable to break away from the shackles of history. Ouyang Shua suppressed the emotions in his heart and asked, How are the other members doing? Lingxi City has completely stabilized its rule over Kunming Prefecture and is strengthening its military preparations. If we don't make any moves here, I'm afraid they will launch an attack on Dongchuan Prefecture in the north alone. Speaking of this, Black Snake smiled. Now that the Marquis has returned, there shouldn't be any big problems in Yunnan Province. Yes, Ouyang Shua was noncommittal. Fallen Phoenix City has made rapid progress in Taiyuan Province and has already taken over the south-central part of Taiyuan Province. Now more than 20 lords in the northern part of Taiyuan Province have banded together to resist the attack of Fallen Phoenix City. Optimistically, they could only defend what they had. Fallen Phoenix City's position as the overlord of Taiyuan Province is unshakable. Ouyang Shua nodded. Feng Xiaohuang was indeed powerful and did not let him down. But there is one thing that I have to report to the Marquis. Black Snake hesitated. Speak. According to the Black Snake Guards, the leader of the Northern Lord Alliance of Taiyuan Province is Feng Xiaohuang's elder brother, Feng Tianlai. The Feng family has built Fengxiang City with the support of the Yan-Huang Alliance and has already reached a considerable scale. It is reported that Di Chun has already proposed an internal meeting of the Yan-Huang Alliance to increase the authority of Fengxiang City in the alliance. This is not surprising. Ouyang Shua's face was calm. Ouyang Shua had basically figured out Di Chen's way of playing with power. 2 years ago, Feng Xiaohuang successfully left the Feng family with Ouyang Shua's strong support and kept the territory of Luofeng County. The remaining Feng family, with the support of the newly established Yan-Huang Alliance, re-established a territory in the northern wilderness of Taiyuan Province, Fengxiang Village. Yan-Huang Alliance, as consideration at that time, was just to set up a chess piece. Therefore, in the next 1 or 2 years, although Fengxiang City was a member of the Yan-Huang Alliance, it had no sense of existence. Even the illusory Lia City was more eye-catching than Fengxiang City. Today, when Fengxiang City suddenly became the bridgehead for the Yan-Huang Alliance to attack fallen Phoenix City, Di Chun and the others took it seriously and hypocritically raised its authority. These disciples of aristocratic families could be said to be extremely cold. The Feng family must have been extremely sullen in the past 2 years. They were almost forgotten by the entire wilderness. I don't know if the Feng family has regretted the decision they made 2 years ago. One more thing. Black Snake continued to report. A month ago, Feng Tianlai had some kind of dodge *T luck and got in touch with a great noble of the Mongolian tribe in the north, obtaining a batch of elite Mongolian warhorses. In fact, that Mongolian noble even sent people to train cavalry for Fengxiang City. What? Ouyang Shua slammed the table and stood up with a shocked expression. The Stygian snake was confused and asked carefully, Marquis. Ouyang Shua's expression was uncertain. After a long time, he sat back down. The scenes from his previous life replayed in his mind. The powerful Mongolian Empire has already begun to move? Ouyang Shua muttered to himself. In this life, only Ouyang Shua knew how powerful the Mongolian Empire was in the game. This giant had been quietly dormant in the early stages of the game, keeping a very low profile. The only thing that interacted with the players was the grassland trade, especially the rich Mongolian warhorses, which had always been loved by the players of the surrounding lords. All along, the Mongolian tribes had been very indifferent. They did not miss a single deal that should be done, but they had never heard of any Mongolian cavalry invading the surrounding territories. It seemed to be said that this was a very docile nomadic tribe. Because of this, the lords of the China region were almost on guard against the Mongolian tribes. Only Ouyang Shua knew that this terrifying nomadic empire had caused a huge disaster to the entire northern territories in his previous life in the game. It even affected the war between nations. Black Snake's words made Ouyang Shua frightened. In his previous life, Ouyang Shua was only an adventurer player and had limited access to information. He only remembered that in the 5th year of Gaia, the Mongolian cavalry had invaded the south, and the territories along the way had all fallen overnight. It was only a month later that there was news that some of the lords at the borders had acted as guides. Digging deeper, these defecting territories had a common characteristic. Before the war broke out, they had already established relations with the Mongolian tribes and received support from the Mongolians. More than half of them were the so-called Mongolian nobles who acted as the middleman. It was obvious that the Mongolians had been preparing for this war for a long time. What Ouyang Shua did not expect was that in the 3rd year of Gaia, they had already begun to take action. The abnormality in Fengxiang City made Ouyang Shua think of something. Ouyang Shua tried hard to calm himself down and said in a deep voice, "Let the Black Snake Guards follow this clue and investigate to the end. Also, send out the order to investigate the territories at the borders of Mongolia and see if there are any similar situations." Understood. Black Snake nodded in response. There was clearly a reason behind the Marquis reaction just now. However, Black Snake was a smart person and naturally knew when to feign ignorance. Especially as an intelligence agency, he could not have too many thoughts or ideas of his own. Send a copy of the information just now to Luo Feng City. Ouyang Shua ordered. This. Black Snake suddenly hesitated. Why? Is there a problem? Ouyang Shua frowned. Black Snake gritted his teeth and said, "Reporting to the Marquis, I wanted to report to you just now. There is conclusive information that the Feng family is actively lobbying Lord Feng Xiaohuang, hoping that she can return to the family. For this, they even offered a bargaining chip to give the Feng Xiaohuang family great power and abolish the old rule of male superiority. Since the hard way didn't work, they resorted to the soft way." Ouyang Shua only found it funny. How did Feng Xiaohuang react? Lord Feng Xiaohuang flatly refused. Black Snake nodded. Even so, in my opinion, we still have to be cautious. Got it. Ouyang Shua nodded. Remember, don't cross the line. No matter what, Feng Xiaohuang is our ally and my friend. Before there is conclusive evidence, don't cause a rift in the alliance because of your investigation. Understand? Ouyang Shual was very serious. He didn't want the alliance to be jittery at the slightest sound. Even more so, he didn't want to cast suspicion on all his allies because of the dragon seeking acupoint. If that happened, it would be very dangerous. Don't worry, I will act appropriately. Black Snake nodded. It is best to focus the investigation on the Feng family. Don't touch Feng Qiuhuang herself. Remember, you are an intelligence agency, not a secret service agency, nor the White Terror. Ouyang Shuo reminded. Under Ouyang Shuo's support, or even intentional indulgence, the Black Snake Guards had grown into a colossus with tentacles all over the world. Black Snake's achievements had long surpassed the mercenary group leader back then. Sometimes Black Snake rejoiced at his choice back then. At that time, he disbanded the mercenary group nervously and integrated into Shanghai City system. He never thought that he would have today's status and achievements. He didn't even dare to think about such power. Because of this, Ouyang Shuo had to remind Black Snake from time to time. It wasn't that he doubted Black Snake's loyalty, but he wanted to prevent the Black Snake Guards from expanding their investigation power or even using public power for private purposes. Understood. The Black Snake Guards will definitely remember the Marquis's words, and we won't dare to overstep the rules. Black Snake decisively expressed his stance after hearing that. In fact, Black Snake wasn't the only one who had changed. Black Snake was no longer the mercenary group leader back then, and Ouyang Shuo was no longer the overlord who showed off his abilities. The current Ouyang Shuo was able to casually sit down and give his subordinates a great amount of pressure. Before, Black Snake could still guess the Marquis's thoughts, but now there was only absolute obedience and respect left in his heart. Most of the time, Black Snake forgot their identities as players. It was as if they were really in an ancient country, facing a ruler with absolute power. They didn't dare to have any disrespectful thoughts. To outsiders, this was very strange and even somewhat incomprehensible. To the players of Shanghai City, especially those who were in important positions, it was natural. No one could tell when the dazzling overlord had transformed into a true overlord. Especially now that the Marquis had returned, Black Snake felt even more strongly. Among all the overlords in the world, who else could cause a tsunami just by returning? No one. Heaven's might was unpredictable, and Black Snake had never felt that this feeling was so close to him. Ouyang Shuo didn't know the raging waves in his subordinate's heart. After reminding him a little, he asked, "How's Heartstone City?" At the end of the day, Ouyang Shuo was most worried about the situation in the north. Otherwise, he wouldn't have transferred the city guards to Heartstone City so early to train. Black Snake was startled. He suppressed the waves in his heart and regained his composure, replying, "Heartstone City is fine for now. For the past 6 months, Handan City has been the most active in the China region. Under Di Chen's leadership, Handan City has been on the offensive for the past 6 months, either by force, by trickery, or by threats and promises. With the unconditional support of the family, Di Chen has resorted to all means to conquer cities and strongholds. News of his success has been spreading. Currently, the capital province, except for the territory of Heartstone City in the north, has all been brought under Handan City's rule. If it wasn't for the help of the city guards, I'm afraid we wouldn't even be able to defend Heartstone City." Chapter 681. Ouyang Shuo did not agree with Black Snake's judgment. Di Chun did not attack Heartstone City because he was afraid of the alliance of mountains and seas, not the city guards. Di Chun saw through the alliance of mountains and seas' determination to defend Heartstone City, which was why he did not act rashly. Handan City was now like Shanghai City. It had eaten too much and needed time to digest. The territory of Jingdo Province could be ranked in the top 3 among all the provinces. If Handan City started another war and attacked Heartstone City, once the alliance of mountains and seas intervened, the flames of war would reach the heavens. This was not good news for Handan City. Di Chun had learned how to weigh the pros and cons. Did the other members of the Yanhuang Alliance do the same? Ouyang Shuo asked. Black Snake nodded. That's right. For the past 6 months, Lord Chunshin has spent a lot of money in the Jingshu province. He has hired hundreds of thousands of player mercenaries and started a strong sweep. Now, the Jingshu province, except for Xiangyang County where King City is located, is all Danyang City's territory. Lord Chunshin has a big appetite and is ready to extend his tentacles into the Central Plains province. Ouyang Shua shook his head. Lord Chunshin had tasted the sweetness of being a mercenary. He was going further and further away on the path of mercenaries. On the surface, the cost of mercenaries was much lower than the cost of maintaining a territorial army. In reality, mercenaries could only be used as support and could not be relied on. Otherwise, it would be extremely disadvantageous to tempering the territorial army. In his previous life, the Danyang City's army was extremely weak in the war and was labeled as a silver spearhead by the players. Unexpectedly, it was still the same in this life. It has to be said that Lord Chunshin was too much of a businessman and liked to calculate the gains and losses of wealth. In terms of the overall situation, there was still no improvement. It was really disappointing. This was the so-called. The onlooker sees the game more clearly than the person involved. Lord Chunshin, who was deeply involved, would not think so. Instead, he would be proud of his own calculations. East Sea Province's Blood Red City and South River Province's Overlord City have also completed their occupation of the province. The only difference is that East Sea Province's King City is in Jianya County. The Jiangnan Province's Hejimen City not only occupied the entire province, but also established Izhou Island as Izhou Prefecture, officially under their rule. Black Snake continued to report. What's the size of Overlord City's navy? What's their combat strength? Ouyang Shua suddenly asked. The Black Snake was stunned. Fortunately, it was prepared. According to investigations, Overlord City has already formed the Zhoushan fleet. Not only that, but Overlord City also planned to set up a Penghu fleet on Izhou Island. The strange thing is that their fleet is almost the same as our navy. This humble subject suspects that the information has been stolen. That guy is quite resourceful. Ouyang Shua had witnessed Xiongba's methods. Have you found out how the information was leaked? I've basically investigated everything. The efficiency of the Black Snake Guards was abnormally high. It should be the official in charge of purchasing warships from Overlord City. He tricked the person in charge of our shipyard. When we detained the factory director, he was still in the dark. He thought it wasn't something important, so he blurted it out. Ouyang Shua's expression turned serious. He sighed with emotion. It seems that in addition to collecting information from the outside, your intelligence department also needs to carry out special training for the officials of the territory's confidential department to enhance their anti-reconnaissance ability. Yes, Black Snake said solemnly. After going down, this humble subject will discuss this matter with Commander Shinbu Hai. And Ouyang Shua nodded and asked, what about Guangxi Province? What's the situation? When Guangxi Province was mentioned, Black Snake smiled. Now, Guangxi Province is very lively. The central part of the province is occupied by Xianyang County and Chang and County, while the northern and southern parts are occupied by Azura City and Luye City, respectively. If it weren't for King City's obstruction, Azura City and Luye City would have already started fighting. Haven't they thought about expanding? Ouyang Shua asked. There are signs. Black Snake nodded. Luye City is actively involved in the Central Plains province. They intend to go out of the pass and enter the hinterland of the Central Plains in one fell swoop. Unfortunately, Luye City's eastward expansion is in conflict with Danyang City's northern expedition strategy. Coupled with Luoyang City's King City's strong stance, I'm afraid it will be difficult for the Central Plains to have any results in a short time. As for Azura City in the north, most of its territory is the Lust Plateau. Its geographical location is relatively poor, the land is barren, and the development potential is limited. Lord Kill Ripper wants to expand even more. Unfortunately, Azura City's north, west, and south sides are all NPC forces, so they don't dare to act rashly. The only east side is occupied by Fengxiang City. Now Azura City is like a bird trapped in a cage, with nowhere to escape. Ouyang Shua frowned and thought of the Mongolian Empire. A corner dog will jump over a wall. Black Snake guards should pay more attention to Azura City, especially pay attention to whether they have contact with the Mongolian tribes. Understood. Black Snake nodded again and said, looking at the Yellow Alliance, the least ambitious is probably Shu's Swordsman City. So far, Swordsman City has only taken one county. After that, they have no desire to continue expanding. Although the mountain roads in Shu are rugged and inconvenient, it's still a little strange. Let the Mountain Sea Guard Shadow Guards pay attention to Swordsman City. In the 3 years of Gaia, Jianghu had been hidden from the world. It was not time for Swordsman City to step onto the stage of history. Yes, Black Snake knew when to advance and retreat. Black Snake also knew that Shui Qianqi, who led the Shadow Guards, was the Marquis's true confidant. Over the past 6 months, countless corrupt officials have been arrested by the Mountain Sea Guard, and most of them were arrested by the Shadow Guards. After Black Snake's introduction, the overall situation in the China region was very clear. Over the past 6 months, the rise of the giants and the retreat of the weak became the main theme of the wilderness. Of the 17 provinces in the China region, 5 had already been taken by the Yellow Alliance. On the contrary, the Mountain Sea Alliance had completely taken over 2 provinces, the Taiyuan province in the north and the Chuanan province in the south. As for the Yunnan province and Lingnan province, they were only 1/3 of the provinces. Whether it was Lingxi City, Black Lion City, or Dragon-Seeking City, none of them had absolute authority in their respective provinces. Wanshi City was suppressed by Handan City to the point of hiding in a corner, only seeking self-preservation. Among them, there was also the worry of Dragon-Seeking City. In contrast, the decline of the Mountain Sea Alliance was an irreversible fact. The situation is not optimistic. Ouyang Shua sighed in his heart. The current situation was that the Yellow Alliance's members were everywhere, catching up to the others and truly becoming a vassal. The Mountain Sea Alliance, on the other hand, was dominated by Mountain Sea City, and the other allies were gradually losing ground. For this to happen, it was because the allies were unable to do what they wanted, and it was also because of Ouyang Shua's influence. In the 3 years of Gaia in his previous life, Di Chun and the rest did not have such momentum. In this life, under the pressure of Mountain Sea City, the major clans had used up all their trump cards in advance, which was why they had achieved such glorious results. As such, the achievements of Bai Hua and the rest were somewhat lacking. If Ouyang Shuo remembered correctly, in his previous life, Bai Hua had only managed to occupy the Yunnan province in the 5 years of Gaia. His current achievements could not be said to be bad. It could only be said that time had changed. In the past half a year, the dormant of Mountain Sea City had already caused a huge uproar. There were endless rumors in the China region, and there were all kinds of rumors. Some said that Ouyang Shua was being talked to by the higher-ups, and some said that Mountain Sea City knew that they were no match for the Yellow Alliance, so they gave up in advance. Although it was laughable, it also reflected the players' understanding of the Mountain Sea Alliance's decline. If it wasn't for the ocean fleet constantly making big news, who knew what would have happened in the end? Naturally, Ouyang Shua did not need to care about these rumors. However, Ouyang Shua had to carry the banner of the Mountain Sea Alliance, because this was the key to him fighting for dominance in the national war in the future. All right, since I've already shown my trump card, let's have a good fight. At this point, Ouyang Shua did not have any fear. Instead, he was full of fighting spirit. After lying dormant for half a year, it was time for Mountain Sea City to come out. Ouyang Shua rubbed his head, temporarily putting aside his thoughts, and waved his hand. You can leave first. I'll take my leave. The Black Snake bowed, and when he left the study, he met Zhang, an official of the Chamberlain of Dependencies, at the door. The two looked at each other, their hearts filled with sorrow. It seemed that the Marquis's report meeting was going to be very long. Greetings, Marquis. Zhang followed him into the study and bowed. Sit. Ouyang Shua's expression was casual, and his mood was not affected by what had just happened. He went straight to the topic. Tell me, what progress has the Chamberlain of Dependencies made in the past half a year? Yes, sir. Zhang was already prepared and began to report. In the past half a year, the Chamberlain of Dependencies seemed to be quiet, but in reality, they had done a lot of work behind the scenes. Ouyang Shuo felt excited when he heard the results they had achieved. Zhang Yi was indeed Zhang Yi and did not let Ouyang Shuo down. According to Zhang Yi, Yunnan, northern Sichuan, southern Hunan, and Lingnan had all been taken down by the Chamberlain of Dependencies, and Shanghai City had inserted their pawns. Among them, the Black Snake Guards and the Mountain Sea Guards had also cooperated. It could be said that every move of the four major city-states was now under the control of Shanghai City. Last night, Yunnan City had just proposed to convene an emergency meeting of the four major city-states. That morning, the news had already spread to the Chamberlain of Dependencies. Other than planting pawns, the Chamberlain of Dependencies had the greatest success in lobbying, which was the northern Sichuan city. In that city-state, a quarter of the lords leaned towards Shanghai City. Among them, there were a few lords who were extremely important in the city-states. This also meant that Shanghai City already had the ability to a certain extent, guide the decision-making of the northern Sichuan city at the right time. On this point, one could not help but admire Zhang Yi's silver tongue. The rise of the Bank of the Four Seas had also helped the Chamberlain of Dependencies to a certain extent. It was precisely because of the bargaining chips that Zhang Yi could successfully persuade the heavyweight lords of the northern Sichuan city. In other words, Shanghai City had already lost a corner of the four major city-states without moving a single soldier. Chapter 682. The success of the Chamberlain of Dependencies was undoubtedly good news for Shanghai City's upcoming battle plans. Shanghai City's hibernation period had ended. Where should they attack first and how? Long before Ouyang Shuo went out to sea, this problem had been handed over to the military office by Qi, Han Xian, and the other generals to formulate a detailed military plan. The Military Affairs Office had been carrying out the preliminary military preparations. All they lacked now was a military order from Ouyang Shuo. So long as the gun sounded, the entire southern territory would once again fall into the flames of war. After Zhang Yi left, Ouyang Shuo received another group of officials. It was not until the guard came to report that the special envoy of the Dali Imperial Court had arrived that the report meeting came to an end. When Ouyang Shuo was promoted to the Marquis of Lian Province, a special envoy from the Imperial Court came to visit him once. Now that he had been promoted to the Duke of Mountain and Sea, he had to accept the Imperial Court's rewards. However, Ouyang Shuo was no longer as excited as he was at that time. After all, the current Shanghai City was comparable to the royal city of Dali. It was even to the extent that it wasn't impossible for Ouyang Shuo to conquer Dali City if he was determined to do so. Since both parties were already standing on equal footing, why would Ouyang Shuo be agitated? Not to mention, once Shanghai City was established as a nation, the imperial seal, imperial robes, and other items bestowed by the imperial court would no longer be of any use. Shanghai City would have to make them themselves. Therefore, although the second conferring ceremony was grand, it was very dull. After sending off the envoy, Ouyang Shuo decided not to continue meeting with the officials. He was prepared to promote Shanghai City to a rank 3 county city first. The rest of the government affairs could be settled at the morning assembly. Ouyang Shuo arrived at the main hall and muttered territory upgrade in his heart. Shua! A white light flashed, and in the middle of the main hall, the golden stone tablet once again slowly rose from the ground. Placing his right hand on the front of the stone tablet, the system notification sounded. System notification, assessing the requirements for Shanghai County to level up. Condition 1. The population has reached the population limit of 1 million, and the requirements are met. In order to increase its population by 500,000, Shanghai City had spent close to a year accumulating its population, and this was the result of the 3 village creation orders. Next time, they would have to think of another way to increase the population. It was impossible for Ouyang Shuo to wait 2 years before promoting Shanghai City to become a capital city. That would be unrealistic. Condition 2. All the basic constructions have been completed and the requirements have been met. The Zither Academy and the wholesale center of a Level 2 county city had already been constructed in the second year of Gaia. As usual, the Zither Academy was built in the Southwest University China Hall, and the wholesale center was built in Midtown. Near the wholesale center was a distribution center built by a first-tier county city. Together, the two centers formed the heart of Shanghai City's commerce and trade. Not only was Shanghai City the political center of the territory, but it was also a true commercial capital. Condition 3. The suzerain's title is at least a first-grade marquis. Ouyang Shuo had already been promoted to a duke, but there was no second first-rank marquis in the entire China region. Even Baiwa and Feng Xiuhuang were slightly lacking. His lead in the title of nobility was truly unrivaled. System notice. Congratulations to player not wearing for establishing Shanghai City. All the requirements to level up have been met. Do you wish to level up? Level up. On the stone tablet, golden light soared into the sky and exploded in the sky, turning into a golden halo that spread in all directions. The halo extended all the way to the new edge of the territory before disappearing again. Not only the China region, but even the overseas Star State County, Friendship City, and Base City were also enveloped by the golden light. At this point, the new territory's luck was truly linked together. System notice. Congratulations to player not wearing for upgrading your territory to a third-tier county city. The county lord's residence has automatically leveled up. Please check for yourself. System notice. Congratulations to player not wearing for upgrading your territory to a third-tier county city. After the promotion, the territory's teleportation point will be added. Please select the location for the teleportation point. Friendly reminder. The teleportation point is not limited to Shanghai City. It can be built in any territory's city. Ouyang Shuo was ecstatic when he heard this. The benefits of being promoted to a third-tier county city came at just the right time. If he wanted to add 2 or 3 teleportation points, Ouyang Shuo would have to think about it. But now, he only wanted to add 1. Apart from building a base city in the Mediterranean Sea, Ouyang Shuo didn't think about anything else. After all, a base city was in great need of a teleportation point. With it, the territory would be connected to the entire European continent and even the African continent. I choose a base city. Ouyang Shuo looked excited. System notice. Location selection completed. Teleportation point in process. System notice. It has been detected that the base city is located overseas. Therefore, the teleportation point has been automatically set to be an international teleportation point. Please refer to the rules for international teleportation points. Please be aware. Ouyang Shuo wasn't surprised by this. Lion City had opened an international teleportation point. It could only be connected to the teleportation point in the territory. In fact, Ouyang Shuo didn't plan to open the teleportation point in the base city to domestic players. Even the allied guilds of the Mountain and Sea Alliance were the same. The situation in the Mediterranean Sea was more complicated than in Southeast Asia. It wasn't suitable to stir up disputes between countries. System notice. Congratulations to player not wearing for upgrading your territory to a third-tier county city. After the promotion, the Lord can make one adjustment to the terrain of the territory. The adjustment will be determined by the system. Please specify the terrain you want to adjust. Friendly reminder. Terrain adjustment only changes the original foundation. You can't change the terrain. For example, you can widen the river channels, raise the mountain ranges, and so on. Finally, Ouyang Shuo was delighted. When he was promoted to a second-tier county city, Ouyang Shuo used this opportunity to widen the Friendship River and Xiushui River in the Lianzhou Basin. He turned Shanghai City into a commercial city that didn't need to rely on North Sea City anymore. Ouyang Shuo would naturally cherish this second opportunity. During the Star Nation War, Ouyang Shuo obtained a mountain opening seal on the battlefield. After using it, he could open a tunnel in any mountain in his territory. If he didn't have this seal, Ouyang Shuo would definitely choose to open a tunnel in the mountain range that separated the Lianzhou Basin and the Annan District and quietly go to the Annan District. With this seal, He wouldn't have to waste such a precious opportunity. Ouyang Shua noticed that the word in the system notice was adjust and not fine-tune like before. This also meant that Ouyang Shua could make more adjustments to the terrain this time. After thinking for a while, Ouyang Shua finally said, extend the Friendship River and Xiushui River and connect them with the main rivers in the Chuanan Province and the Lingnan Province. Ouyang Shua's goal was to strengthen the transportation between Shanghai City and the various counties in his territory and further break the isolation of Shanghai City. A real capital city should be accessible from all directions and have both land and water. Currently, Shanghai City could only travel by sea. The land route could be connected to the Chuanan Province through the Southern Town Pass in the north and the Lingnan Province through the Mountain Road in the east. The mountain road in the west was also gradually being opened up. The problem was that the land route was difficult and the mountain road was even more rugged. Only by completely opening up the inland water route was the right way. The Friendship River and Xiushui River, the two rivers of life in the Lianzhou Basin, naturally became the key to breaking through the situation. System notice. Application for terrain change confirmed. Extending the river. Calculation in progress. System notice. Calculation completed. Terrain change completed. The Friendship River extends 1,200 kilometers to the northwest, and the Xiushui River extends 1,300 kilometers to the northeast. The two rivers are connected with the Pearl River system. Please check the specific situation yourself. Ouyang Shua was excited when he heard this. The Pearl River system was the second largest river in China and the third longest river. In reality, its annual runoff was more than 349.2 billion cubic meters. It was the second largest river system in the country, second only to the Yangtze River and 6 times the annual runoff of the Yellow River. The Pearl River consisted of 3 major tributaries, the West River, the North River, and the East River. It flowed through the Yunnan Province, Chuanan Province, Lingnan Province, Shaonan Province, and the Jiangchuan Province. Basically, the Pearl River system covered the entire southern border. It could even be said that the Pearl River system was connected to the northeast of Annan. Therefore, it was understandable that Ouyang Shua was excited. The Friendship River and Xiushui River were connected to the Pearl River system. In an instant, the inland water transportation of the entire territory was completely revitalized. Especially in the game, the map was expanded by 10 times and the river was widened. The waterways were more developed and convenient. At this point, Shanghai City's position as the capital city had basically taken shape. As the river extended, the territory promotion was also completed. Ouyang Shua heard a system announcement. System announcement. Congratulations to player not have clothes for becoming the first Lord of China to be promoted to a level 3 county city. The reward is 10,000 achievement points. As soon as the announcement came out, the entire China region was shocked. Ouyang Shua used this unique method to announce his strong return. Handan City, the Lord's Mansion. The moment Di Chun heard the system announcement, his face turned ashen. He gritted his teeth. Damn it, that guy beat me to it again. Handan City was only lacking Di Chun's title to be promoted to a level 3 county city. Di Chun was now a level 2 marquis. He only needed 20,000 achievement points to be promoted to a level 1 marquis. He had originally planned to use the next battle to smoothly promote. That way, Handan City could surpass Shanghai City and be the first to be promoted to a level 3 county city. If that really happened, Handan City's reputation would definitely soar. With the glorious achievements of the Yan-Huang Alliance in the past 6 months, they might even be able to step on the Shanghai Alliance. But Di Chun did not expect Ouyang Shua to complete his territory promotion at this time. As such, everything was for naught. After a level 3 county city, there was only one chance left for the capital city. Thinking of Ouyang Shua's current Duke title, Di Chun did not have any expectations. Therefore, a level 3 county city was Handan City's only chance to make a comeback. Unexpectedly, even so, Ouyang Shua did not let him have his way. As such, how could Di Chun not be angry? The saying of having a nemesis is really a nightmare that cannot be shaken off. Chapter 683. P.S. Updated again. Of course, Ouyang Shua didn't understand Di Chen's anger and continued to check the attributes of the territory. Territory name, Protectorate of the South, Lord. Protectorate of the South, Shan Hai Duke, Duke. Main title. Number 1 County, increases territory popularity by 50. Subtitle. Holy Land of 100 Clans, Holy Land of Craftsmen, Prosperous Land of Martial Arts, Territory Administration. Shanghai City, Level 3 County. Population Administration, 1 million/2 million. Refugee spawn rate, 500, 1 plus 50, equals 750 refugees per day. True spawn rate, 750 plus 700 plus 700 is equal to 2,150 refugees per day. Territory area, 8 counties, more than 2 million square kilometers. Territory characteristics, omitted territory luck, red dragon, 1/3 purple dragon. Political index, 87 out of 100, determines administrative efficiency, relates to popular sentiment. Economic index, 88 out of 100, determines trade prosperity, relates to taxes. Culture index, 91 out of 100, determines education, relates to quality of residence. Technology index, 60 out of 100, determines research level, relates to technology tree. Military index, 90 out of 100, determines military strength, relates to stable relationship. Territory administration, Lianzhou County, Cheongzhou County, Liizhou County, Zhaoqing County, Xuanzhou County, Wuzhou County, Jin County, Xingzhou County, Zhenhai City, Friendship City, and Base City Financial Institution. Bank of the Four Seas, 55 shares. Territory Academy. Southwest University China Hall, Principal Jiang Shang. Army Martial Arts Hall, Principal Sun Wu. 100 Schools of Thought. Military, Legalism, Moism. Agriculture, Vertical and Horizontal. Shang Family, Territory Chamber of Commerce. Omitted, Special Building. Omitted, Hidden Building. Mazu Temple, Recruitment Hall, Yellow Emperor Temple, Silver Prayer Tower, General Selection Platform. List of basic buildings. Frowny Face Academy. Official office in charge of calligraphy. Apart from researching calligraphy, it is also responsible for collecting information from the people and training calligraphy apprentices. Construction requirements. Great calligrapher. Academy building blueprint. 40,000 units of wood, 40,000 units of green bricks, 20,000 units of stone. Construction time, 20 days. Astronomical observatory, an astronomical scientific building that manages the calendar. During the day, one can observe the shadow of the sun and observe the polar stars at night. Construction requirements. Core member of the School of Yin Yang. Building blueprints for the Star Observatory, 20,000 units of wood, 100,000 units of green bricks, 50,000 units of stone. Construction time, 30 days. Compared to a second-level county city, a third-level county city's attribute list officially included territory luck. It was because becoming a capital city meant establishing a nation, and territory providence was a prerequisite. The population limit of a third-class county city had doubled once again. Based on Shanghai City's refugee respawn rate, it would take a year and a half to fill up the new population of 1 million. In addition, the current Shanghai City was planned to be a capital city. After the Friendship River and Qiushui River connected to the Pearl River, it became the political, economic, cultural, technological, and commercial center of the territory. Shanghai City might be big, but every inch of land was worth its weight in gold. Therefore, ordinary refugees could no longer be settled in Shanghai City. Instead, they were relocated to the nearby Lianzhou County. In this way, it would take even longer to fill the gap of 1 million people. Ouyang Shua couldn't wait any longer. In the 4th year of Gaia, Shanghai City had to establish itself as a nation. Within a year, the 4 indexes of Shanghai City had increased by 1 point. However, the rate of increase was incomparable to before. It was crawling at a snail's pace. Even a newly added technology index had just reached 60 points. According to what Ouyang Shua knew, Among the 5 indexes of the capital, other than the technology index, the others had to exceed 90 points. Even the technology index had to exceed 75 points. There is still a long way to go. Of the 2 newly added basic buildings, the Academy was slightly better and could be built immediately after some hard work. The Star Observatory was more troublesome. As the representative of the school of Yinyang, Fengyin, did not appear, the school of Yinyang gradually became a hidden school in the wilderness. It was not easy to invite a school of Yinyang apprentice to appear. All in all, from the moment Shanghai City was promoted to a third-class county city, it had to start working at full speed. It couldn't slack off for even a moment. It had to work hard toward the final goal of becoming a capital city. By the time he finished checking the territory's attributes, it was already noon. Ouyang Shuo returned to the rear hall and had lunch with Song Jia and Binger. Upon seeing Ouyang Shuo, Song Jia glared at him fiercely. There was a hidden bitterness in her eyes. The blush on Song Jia's face had yet to dissipate completely. It was obvious that she had used rouge to conceal it. Her clothes were especially conservative today. Her collar was high, obviously to cover up the traces of last night. Thinking about the craziness of last night, Ouyang Shuo smiled. He picked up the bowl of soup in front of him and took a sip. Ouyang Shuo was stunned. With his sense of taste, he could immediately tell that there were deer antler, knotweed, and other nourishing ingredients in the soup. Roughly estimating, there were at least 6 nourishing ingredients in the soup. Furthermore, they were all aged top-grade medicinal herbs. If it wasn't for Ouyang Shuo's profound cultivation, he would have had a nosebleed. It's too nourishing. Ouyang Shuo laughed and shook his head. He glanced at his wife. Song Jia sensed Ouyang Shuo's gaze and lowered her head in embarrassment, pretending that she didn't see it. The atmosphere at the dining table suddenly became charming. The quick-witted Binger was originally sitting quietly at the side eating. Her obedient appearance was extremely similar to Song Jia. Her movements were elegant and carried the aura of a young lady. It was obvious that the little girl had already awakened her womanly consciousness and was instinctively learning from Song Jia. Seeing the scene between her brother and sister-in-law, Binger asked in confusion, "Brother, what's wrong? Why are you looking so strange? Did you bully sister-in-law again? She doesn't seem to be in a good mood today." Cough. Ouyang Shuo's face turned red. He glared at the little girl and said, "Eat your food." Oomph. Seeing that her brother was unwilling to speak, Binger pouted and stabbed her chopsticks into the rice to vent her dissatisfaction. Ouyang Shuo didn't care. He hurriedly finished his lunch and returned to the study. He had just returned to Shanghai City and had too many things to handle. Ouyang Shuo didn't even have time to rest. After returning to the study, Ouyang Shuo picked up the memorials that Bai Nanpu had sorted out in the morning and started to read them one by one. In the past 6 months, the situation in China had changed. Shanghai City naturally didn't do nothing. Before Ouyang Shuo went out to sea, he had completed the tasks assigned to the 4 general bureaus. Under Wei Yang's control, the implementation of the territory code was very smooth. The concept of law had already begun to permeate the hearts of the people. The dignity of the law had already begun to appear. Wei Yang's method was to vigorously promote the territory code while going into battle with real swords and guns. For those who broke the law, regardless of who they were, regardless of their position, they were all severely punished according to the law. When the territory code was first promulgated, whether it was the common people or the government officials, they were not used to the territory code. There were hundreds and thousands of people who broke the territory code every day. There were petty thieves, there were looters, there were extortionists, there were also those who bribed and accepted bribes. The Internal Affairs Bureau's method was to not let a single one of them go. They were all arrested and put on trial. As a result, the jails of the various counties in the territory became overcrowded. The officials of the Internal Affairs Bureau were so busy that they were dizzy. There were simply too many cases to handle. Because of this, Wei Yang decisively ordered the Internal Affairs Bureau to set up 2 circuit courts to handle all kinds of troublesome cases. For a moment, the territory was in a state of panic. The territory code did not only target the natives, but also the players of the territory. Because of this, Wei Yang specially instructed the Census Bureau to strengthen the household registration of the mutants. Anyone who registered in the territory and obtained a household registration had to obey the territory code. Those who did not register were all treated as illegal personnel and were given 3 days to leave. Otherwise, they would be forcibly expelled. Not long ago, a disciple of the Song family, Song Jian, used his cousin Song Jia's status to cause trouble in Shanghai City. He had a conflict with a peddler on the streets. In a rage, he drew his sword and stabbed the peddler to death. This was like poking a hornet's nest. According to the ancient saying, the current Shanghai City was under the feet of the emperor. How dare Song Jian treat human life like grass? Song Jian was immediately arrested by the bailiffs of Shanghai City's Public Order Bureau. In the process of arresting him, Song Jian's expression was extremely arrogant. He kept muttering, "I am the brother-in-law of your marquis. How dare you arrest me?" The bailiffs hesitated when they heard this and asked the leading officer for instructions. "My lord, what do you think we should do?" The bailiffs could not be blamed for hesitating. In ancient times, Song Jian was considered a relative of the emperor. The one in charge of this arrest was one of the future 3 super arresters, Zhao Kuei, the head of Shanghai City's Internal Affairs Bureau. Zhao Kuei did not even frown as he ordered, "Arrest him. If anything happens, I will take responsibility." Based on Zhao Kuei's understanding of the marquis, he would never protect such a black sheep. "Yes, my lord." With his superior's order, the bailiffs were immediately emboldened. In no time, Song Jian was arrested and brought to justice. The bailiffs of Shanghai City were originally soldiers, so they were extremely powerful. How could an idiot like Song Jian compare to them? The efficiency of Shanghai City's Internal Affairs Bureau was extremely high. The next day, the Internal Affairs Bureau announced Song Jian's sentence, a life for a life, and he should be executed according to the law. The moment the news spread, the entire Shanghai City was shaken. That night, Old Master Song went to the protectorate of the southern border to plead with Song Jia. No one knew what the two of them talked about. All they knew was that in less than an hour, Old Master Song left the protectorate of the southern border with an ashen face. Early the next morning, Song Jian was publicly executed. He was beheaded in public. At this moment, all the villains of Shanghai City were completely terrified. The reason was simple. If even a relative of the emperor like Song Jian could not escape the death penalty, how could others be spared? In an instant, the authority of the codex soared. In half a year, there were 3 or 4 similar cases. Without exception, the Internal Affairs Bureau did not show favoritism. Through the impartial adjudication of the cases, the Internal Affairs Bureau, under Wei Yang's leadership, successfully implemented the codex. During this period, Song Jia's actions won Wei Yang's praise. Chapter 684. Apart from the Internal Affairs Department, the Military Affairs Department also had remarkable results. The expansion of the territory's army had been completed. The garrison divisions that had been transferred from various places had been reorganized. The logistics and supply centers of the 3 armies' headquarters had also been completed. Massive amounts of resources had been transported to the front lines. At the same time, the military tournament that had lasted for 3 months had already decided the champions of the team competition, the 6 major military branches, and the overall military champion. Other than the overall champion, who had to wait for Ouyang Shua to personally award the prize, the other champions had already received the corresponding honorary titles and had been promoted. After the tournament, martial arts training became the norm in the military. Those who had been defeated in the arena were naturally indignant and wanted to win again. The head of the Military Affairs Department, Du Ruhui, had already announced that the military tournament would become a regular event. It would be held once a year, and every year, a martial arts champion would be born. Other than the Army, the Navy was even more dazzling. The Nanyang Navy's North Sea Bay Fleet, Cliff Mountain Fleet, Jiaozhou Fleet, and Singapore Fleet had all been expanded. Together with the incomplete Mediterranean Fleet, the Nanyang Navy had a total of more than 470,000 troops. The Navy's overall combat power was already comparable to the Army. Shanghai City's naval strategy was gradually taking shape. The only thing it lacked was the upgrading of warships and firearms. With the technology of the steam engine, this goal was already far in sight. The territory's basic education and basic medical care were progressing smoothly with the support of a large amount of funds. This autumn, the second batch of students would be enrolled in the school according to the new school system. In the fourth year of Gaia, the territory would definitely welcome a great increase in the talents nurtured by the territory. Even without the imperial examinations, the territory would be able to recruit batches of low-level officials through the graduating students every year. Shanghai City's talent development system was breaking away from the shackles of the ancient imperial examination system and moving closer to the modern civil service system. It had a stronger vitality and vigor. This was also the key to breaking away from the prejudice of one's family. More than 5,000 spring students from Southwest University China Hall and the Army Martial Arts Hall had all graduated. Under the leadership of the Administration Department and the Military Affairs Department, they were assigned to various government offices and military posts. With the support of Ouyang Shua's special funds, the two academies had reached a new level, be it the quality of the teachers, the teaching facilities, or even the standard of the students. Those who came to study in the two academies of Shanghai City were no longer limited to the students of the Shanghai Alliance's allies. The scholars from poor families of the various king cities all flocked to Shanghai City to study. The academic atmosphere in Shanghai City had long surpassed that of the 9 king cities. Even Luoyang, which was overseen by Emperor Wu of Han, revered Confucianism and promoted the study of Confucian classics, did not attract the attention of scholars like Southwest University China Hall. This was because Southwest University China Hall was not only free of charge, but it also provided additional subsidies for students who had difficulties. As a result, some scholars from poor families simply moved their families to Shanghai City and settled down there. The officials of Shanghai City would give appropriate subsidies to such students. More importantly, it was Southwest University China Hall's tolerant and open academic atmosphere. Hundreds of schools of thought were able to take root here and grow healthily. The clash of academics was happening every day. The great era of contention was slowly being nurtured in Shanghai City. Apart from the graduates, the officials and generals of the two academies had also returned to their posts. Some of the students who performed well in the academy were promoted as soon as they graduated with the recommendation of the academy. There were county magistrates who were promoted to prefectural magistrates, and there were also battalion officers who were directly promoted to brigade commanders. The bureaucratic system of the territory was becoming more and more perfect. In the past half a year, the quality of the officials and generals of Shanghai City had been greatly improved. The talent pool of the territory had increased by a large margin. According to the head of the administrative department, Xiao He, even if the territory expanded by 4 to 5 counties, the current talent pool would be able to support it. Last year's talent shortage was no longer a problem. This way, Ouyang Shua could further delegate power and focus his energy on external struggles. The situation in the China region was becoming more and more clear, and it was not far from the clash between the Shanghai Alliance and the Yanhuang Alliance. Apart from a domestic situation, Ouyang Shu also had a plan for the international situation. Not to mention the faraway, the ASEAN was already a huge challenge for Shanghai City. Ouyang Shua had a plan how to completely destroy the ASEAN in a year or two. The finance department of the 4 main departments had also achieved great results. The sea trade route between Shanghai City and Xuanzhou City had been completely opened. After the war between the Star Nations, the Jiaozhou fleet led by Shi Lang began to sweep up the pirates within the range of the sea route. Shi Lang was an expert in wiping out pirates, and he was familiar with the South China Sea, so the efficiency of wiping out pirates was quite high. More than half of the soldiers in the Cliff Mountain Fleet were contributed by Shi Lang. Today, the entire sea route was under the protection of the Shanghai City Navy, and merchant ships could travel without worry. Opening up the sea trade route in Xuanzhou was not only of great importance to the territory, but also meant that there was another important trade node on the Grand Line. The merchant ships along the coast of the China region would use Quanzhou as a transit point and follow the Grand Line opened by Shanghai City to conduct international trade in Southeast Asia. The trade agreements that Shanghai City had signed with Johor, Nepal, and other countries would also play a huge role. Because of the intervention of Shanghai City, there was a drastic change within the ASEAN. On one hand, Johor, Nepal, and other countries that were friendly with Shanghai City earned huge economic benefits through the ocean trade with the China region. On the other hand, with the islands around Qingzhou County as a base, the war between the adventurers of the China region and the players of Java was also in full swing. Every day, there were hundreds of players dying in the Scarlet Zone. The players of Java were still very strong. After fighting for a few months, they did not have the slightest intention of retreating. Last month, even the adventurers of Johor, under the instigation of the leader of the Fierce Tiger mercenary group, began to frequently harass the border of Qingzhou County. In this regard, the adventurers of the China region naturally would not let it go. The narrow and long sea area between Qingzhou County and Johor became a gray area for both sides to PK. As a result, there was also a division in Johor. The Lord players led by Shanda and Yan'an advocated peaceful trade, while the adventurers led by Shadia were involved in the whirlpool of the war. The situation in Southeast Asia had become unprecedentedly complicated. The slightest disturbance could turn into a huge war. It was already 4 in the afternoon when he finished reading the memorials. Ouyang Shuo rubbed his slightly swollen head, simply leaned on the chair, and closed his eyes to rest. After the ocean voyage, Ouyang Shuo's burden was even greater. Shanghai City was such a huge plate, yet it was all on his shoulders. To be honest, it was really not easy, especially the decline of the Shanghai Alliance. Ouyang Shuo was even more worried. It had been 2 days since he returned to Shanghai City, but Ouyang Shuo had yet to communicate with his allies. It was not that he did not want to, but if he did not understand the situation clearly, he would not be able to talk about it. Now, his allies were all big shots, and they would not be easily manipulated by Ouyang Shuo. Putting aside the dragon-seeking technique, Ouyang Shuo could no longer see through Feng Qiuhuang's thoughts. All along, Feng Qiuhuang had been estranged from the other allies. Feng Qiuhuang's background had always been a taboo for the Siege Lions and the other commoner lords. However, Fallen Phoenix City had grown to become the second strongest territory in the Alliance. When the Siege Lions and the others did nothing, Feng Qiuhuang went against the trend and achieved dazzling achievements, saving the reputation of the Alliance to a certain extent. As such, the Siege Lions and the others would not be happy at all. Instead, it would bury a deeper and bigger thorn in their hearts. The Alliance was no longer the Alliance of the past. Thinking of this, Ouyang Shuo could not help but fall into a trance. In the second year of Gaia, when they held their first Alliance conference in Shanghai City, a group of young people were dancing and singing around a bonfire in the Marquis Manor's back garden, fantasizing about the future. At that time, they were so harmonious. The scenes from yesterday seemed to be happening in front of him, but it was already out of reach. I have to have a good talk with them, Ouyang Shuo thought. Half an hour later, Ouyang Shuo opened his eyes. After going through the memorials, Ouyang Shuo did not plan on staying in the study any longer. Men, prepare the horse. Yes, the personal guard captain, Chun Damong, responded and turned to leave. Riding on the Azure Lightning, Ouyang Shuo brought his personal guards and headed for the Southern City District. Although Little Blue had become Ouyang Shuo's mount, Ouyang Shuo still chose to ride the Azure Lightning when traveling in the city. Little Blue was too eye-catching and too ostentatious. Furthermore, the little fellow did not like being ridden by Ouyang Shuo. When there was no war, it was rare to see its shadow. It would either be in Cliff Mountain City's Spirit Beast Pavilion or roaming in the sea. Compared to its master, Ouyang Shuo, the little fellow was very comfortable. The Southern City District was directly connected to the Royal City. The city gate was personally guarded by the Imperial Guards. Seeing the Marquis and his entourage, the guards immediately let them in. In just half a year, the southern city district, which was the military zone of the territory, had completely changed. Previously, the four major military workshops played the leading role here. Now, it was the territory of industrialization. The first four major military workshops had all turned to high-end manufacturing. The bow and crossbow workshop was now only responsible for producing the 3 bows, 8 bulls bed crossbow and juga repeating crossbow. The armor workshop was now only responsible for producing the general-level radiant armor, infantry armor, and iron armor beast armor. The weapons workshop was only responsible for custom-made weapons for the military generals. Ordinary weapons and equipment had already been transferred to the local military workshops for processing. A small portion of the empty land was used to build steel mills, firearms workshops, and artillery workshops. More than half of the land was empty. That was prepared for steam engines and other industrial machines. Coming to the southern city district, Ouyang Shuo wanted to go to the 7th Research Institute to personally hand over the technical manuals he bought to Liu Mo. At the same time, he wanted to understand the territory's industrial development. Seeing the current situation of the southern city district, Ouyang Shuo could not help but be dumbfounded. If no one led the way, he would not even be able to find the gate of the 7th Research Institute. Chapter 685. Luckily, Liu Mo appeared in time and helped Ouyang Shuo out of his predicament. Marquis. Liu Mo bowed with a passionate look in his eyes. Ouyang Shuo smiled when he saw this. He naturally knew why Liu Mo was so passionate. The steam engine news had already spread throughout China. Even a technical geek like Liu Mo knew about it. Unfortunately, the related technical manuals had not been sent to the 7th Research Institute. Let's go to your headquarters to talk. Ouyang Shuo got off his horse and walked side by side with Liu Mo. Due to the territory's industrialization, the 7th Research Institute had been expanding for the past 6 months. Now, it had developed into a large-scale research institute with a complete organizational structure and more than 1,000 researchers. The Research Institute's headquarters had also been expanded several times. Around the headquarters building, there were 5 to 6 large-scale laboratories, including the Materials Research Institute, Mechanics Research Institute, Thermal Research Institute, Mechanical Research Institute, and so on. The people in charge of the laboratories were all top researchers in the real world. The 7th Research Institute had become the territory's technology center and research brain. Any one of them was a professor or a PhD supervisor. There were no less than 20 academicians in the real world. As soon as he walked into the Research Institute, Liu Mo started mumbling, "Steam engine, steam engine." Ouyang Shuo was speechless at such a technical geek. He directly threw Steam Engine Manufacturing Technical Manual and Weaving Technical Manual to Liu Mo. "Take a look." Liu Mo looked like he had found a treasure. He immediately flipped through the books and ignored Ouyang Shuo. Luckily, his assistant was smart and quickly poured a cup of hot tea for Marquis. "Why is there a loom?" Liu Mo suddenly spoke. There was a hint of disdain in his tone. Liu Mo was an expert in thermal weapons. He was interested in the steam engine because it could promote the development of the steel industry. At the same time, it could speed up the design of mechanical manufacturing and thus promote the research of thermal weapons. As for the loom, what is that? It's an old antique. It's useless. Ouyang Shuo had an expression as if he knew this would happen. He said solemnly, "Let me tell you, the importance your research institute places on the loom is the same as the steam engine. You can't shirk your responsibilities." For a technical geek, the loom was not attractive. But from Ouyang Shuo's point of view, the loom was an endless source of profit. "All right," Liu Mo replied reluctantly. A technical geek's time was very precious. It would be harder to distract him than to ascend to the heavens. Seeing this, Ouyang Shuo clenched his teeth and said, "How about this? When you can mass-produce the loom, I'll give you another 500,000 gold coins as industrial funds. How about it?" "Really?" Liu Mo jumped up when he heard this. A monarch does not go back on his words. "All right, 2 months, at most 2 months, there will definitely be results." Liu Mo made a military pledge. Ouyang Shuo nodded. He stood up and walked to the courtyard outside the main hall. Bang, bang, bang. He took out several large items from his storage pouch, including a steam engine, a loom, and 2 Spanish cannons. Fortunately, Ouyang Shua's storage pouch was big enough. Otherwise, he wouldn't have been able to bring these things back. Is this a sample of a steam engine? Lu Mo followed him out, his eyes shining. Not bad. There's also that. Ouyang Shua pointed at the cannon. That's a Spanish cannon. It should be able to inspire you in developing a new type of cannon. Hearing this, Lu Mo stepped forward and carefully observed the Spanish cannon. Then, Ouyang Shua saw Lu Mo continuously taking out tools from his storage pouch. There was a ruler, a magnifying glass, a hammer, a charcoal pen, a notebook, and so on. There were even some tools that Ouyang Shua didn't recognize. It seemed like Lu Mo's storage pouch was the real treasure pouch. Then, Ouyang Shua saw Lu Mo calling for people to bring large cutting tools. From the looks of it, this geek was going to dismantle the Spanish cannon on the spot. Wait. Ouyang Shua stopped Lu Mo and took out another thick book. Take a look at this. Lu Mo took it and looked at it. What's this? Atlantis Mimic Aircraft Manufacturing Technical Manual, the legendary technological achievement of the Atlantis civilization. Take a look at it and see if you have the confidence to manufacture it. Ouyang Shua nodded. With just one look, Lu Mo was puzzled. In comparison, the Spanish cannon could no longer attract Lu Mo's attention. It had to be said that Ouyang Shua brought one surprise after another today. This is a bit difficult. After a while, Lu Mo sighed, but his eyes were burning. The greater the challenge, the more exciting it was for a geek. You guys take your time to study it. Ouyang Shua saw that the sky was getting dark and took out the last item. It was an exquisite wooden box. He passed it to Lu Mo and was ready to leave. What kind of technology is this? Lu Mo was curious. Ouyang Shua sighed. It's not a technology. It's a gift for Uncle and Auntie. He had heard that Lu Mo was too engrossed in his research and had relapsed after entering the 7th Research Institute. Just like in real life, he immersed himself in research and did not care about his family. According to Song Jia, this sworn brother of his had not returned home for 2 months and had been staying in the Research Institute. Lu Mo's body stiffened as he held the wooden box. Ouyang Shua did not say anything and patted his shoulder. Research is important, but if you have time, take some time to accompany your parents. They miss you a lot. With that, Ouyang Shua left. Lu Mo was left alone, holding the wooden box and standing in the middle of the courtyard. August 22nd, Shanghai City, Everlasting Palace. Ouyang Shua woke up early. After his morning exercise, Song Jia had also woken up and prepared hot water for him to bathe. After bathing, Song Jia took out a royal robe and prepared to help Ouyang Shua change. No, bring me the armor. Ouyang Shua shook his head. Today is your first court session. Are you wearing armor? Song Jia was puzzled. That's right. Ouyang Shua had to send a signal to the outside world that Shanghai City was governed by martial arts. 2 or 3 days after his return, Ouyang Shua's promotion to Duke seemed to have been rewarded by the imperial court. Everything else remained the same. Even the title of vassal remained the same. Of course, that was not the case. Compared to a marquis, a duke was a level higher. It was equivalent to another qualitative change. During the spring and autumn warring states period, even a monarch of a country might not necessarily be a duke. Especially during the spring and autumn period, people like Duke Huan of Qi, Duke Xiang of Song, Duke Wen of Jin, and Duke Nu of Qin were all known as duke. Of course, the word in the middle was their posthumous title. Their real titles were Duke Qi, Duke Song, Duke Jin, and Duke Qin. It was not until the end of the spring and autumn period that the experts among the feudal lords began to call themselves kings. For example, King Zhuang of Chu. During the end of the Warring States period, Qin and Qi were known as the Eastern and Western emperors. At that time, the Zhou royal family only existed in name. In China, there was a lot of knowledge about how to address the monarch. It was precisely because of this that it needed to be changed on a grand occasion. According to the ancient custom, after Ouyang Shua was promoted to duke, the title of his vassal would be changed to lord. When Shanghai City was founded, Ouyang Shua's title of king would be changed to king. As for emperor and monarch, they were titles that only the imperial and imperial dynasties of a higher level could use. Everything had its own rules. At the same time, the previous political and military meetings were changed to imperial court meetings. Therefore, today was the first imperial court meetings in the history of Shanghai City. It was of great significance. On such a day, Ouyang Shua's every word and action would be interpreted by his vassal and released a signal. Ouyang Shua gave up his imperial robe and changed into a military uniform. At 8 o'clock in the morning, the officials were already waiting in the main hall. Previously, when discussing politics, big shots like the director of the general administration had seats in the main hall. They could sit cross-legged, and there was a table in front of them with tea and fruit plates on it. Now, apart from the high and mighty monarch's seat, the rest of the seats in the main hall were empty. The officials of the Department of Culture had taken advantage of these 2 days to decorate the main hall according to the new etiquette. During the imperial court meetings, other than Ouyang Shua, all the other officials had to stand. This was the majesty of the monarch. Even Ouyang Shua couldn't do anything about it and had to follow the etiquette. Fortunately, this kind of imperial court meetings was not held every day. According to the rules, the imperial court meetings were held twice a month. Usually, Ouyang Shua handled government affairs in the imperial study, so the officials naturally didn't have to stand all the time. At this moment, Secretary Lang by Nanpu announced, "The monarch has arrived." Ouyang Shua was dressed in military uniform with the Scarlet Knight's sword at his waist and the Emperor's seal in his hand. He slowly walked into the main hall from behind the screen and stood in front of the table with a solemn and respectful expression. "Greetings, monarch." In an instant, hundreds of officials in the main hall bowed in unison. What they performed was the most authentic etiquette of a monarch and his vassal. Given Ouyang Shua's philosophy, he naturally couldn't stand the kneeling etiquette of the Yuan, Ming, and Qing dynasties. The ancients believed that only statues of gods could kneel, and not even emperors were qualified. Moreover, the ancient emperors valued benevolence and love for their people, so they couldn't tolerate the theory of kneeling. Especially in the Qing dynasty, treating officials as slaves was even more trampling on their dignity. As a modern person, Ouyang Shua couldn't accept it. Making Xiao He, family, and the other officials kneel was simply an insult to their dignity. Emperor Qin, Emperor Wu, and the Tang sect's ancestor Song did not like it. "Everyone, please rise." Ouyang Shua's voice was steady. Because the country hadn't been established yet, his words were taboo. "Thank you, monarch." The officials stood up and saw the marquis in military uniform. Their eyes narrowed. Du Ruhui, Hua Xiubing, and the other military officials were naturally excited. Xiao He and the other civil officials felt their hearts tremble slightly. The marquis's action was extraordinary. Fortunately, strictly speaking, Xiao He, family, and Wei Yang were not purely civil officials. They were all experts in both literature and martial arts, and the Confucian scholars of the later generations couldn't compare. Moreover, this was the wilderness, a chaotic world comparable to the Warring States period. It was basically unrealistic for civil officials to rule the country. Ouyang Shua sat in the seat of honor and gazed into the distance. He said, "Today's court meeting will first discuss a matter." Chapter 686. Xuanwu Zhuang Yuan. The first thing Ouyang Shua did when he arrived at the imperial court was to confer titles to show auspiciousness. Summon, martial scholar Nyoda, enter the hall. A moment later, a tall and sturdy military general quickly entered the hall. He didn't even dare to raise his head. With a schwa sound, he knelt down on one knee, cupped his fists, and said in a rough voice, "This General Nyo pays his respects to the Lord." There was a slight tremor in his voice. Nyoda was just an ordinary battalion commander in the Dragon Stallion Army. In the past, he would never have had the opportunity to appear in the imperial court, much less be the first person to be summoned by the Lord. Just based on this point, it was enough for Nyoda to brag for a lifetime. "Rise!" Ouyang Shuo gestured for Bai Nanpu to summon him. Bai Nanpu understood and took out the edict he had prepared earlier. The emperor has decreed that the Marshal Zhongyin Yoda, who has bravely surpassed the three armies, will be conferred the rank of 5th-ranked General Zhao. At the same time, he will be promoted to commander of the 5th Division of the Imperial Guard, effective immediately. A look of ecstasy flashed across Niu Da's face as he kowtowed again. "Thank you, Lord, for your grace." This upright soldier didn't hide his excitement at all. When the old foxes saw this, they all shook their heads and laughed. Some of them praised him, while others looked at him with disdain. Du Ruhui, the director of the General Administration of Military Affairs, had promised that the martial arts champion would be promoted to a division commander before the tournament. It's just that Jun Shang will personally decide which army they'll be assigned to. Du Ruhui had previously suggested that Nyoda be assigned to the 2nd Legion of the Dragon Stallion Army. After all, Nyoda came from the Dragon Stallion Army, so there were fewer obstacles for him to hold a post in the 2nd Legion. It was a qualitative leap from a battalion commander to a division commander. To put it bluntly, a battalion commander mainly used force to intimidate others, but when it came to a division commander, they relied on their brains. Nyoda was promoted all at once, skipping the brigade marshal's training in the middle. He might not be able to handle it. Du Ruhui's move was considered a safe strategy. However, Ouyang Shuo had a new idea. It just so happened that the position of regiment commander of the 5th Division of the Imperial Guard Corps was vacant. Therefore, he simply transferred Nyoda into the Imperial Guards as a role model for the rest of the army. The Imperial Guard Corps was the territory's trump card. How could a division commander of the Imperial Guard Corps compare to an ordinary division commander? As such, it was no wonder that Nyoda would be so overjoyed. Nyoda's promotion to regiment commander was already a jump of 2 ranks. Entering the Imperial Guard Corps was undoubtedly a meteoric rise. As for whether or not he was competent, it was not within Nyoda's consideration for the time being. In Nyoda's eyes, whoever had the bigger fist was the boss in the army. If anyone dared to disobey him, he would beat them until they did. This was Nyoda's military logic. It was simple, crude, and sometimes effective. Said, Shan said, Da's war. Yang Tianho Ohue Yang de Wu, and stood and took. Yang, Li, and Yang was da, and long Yang de da. Yang said, Dian Yin was Yun, da this armor was previously worn by me. I now bestow it to you as a reward. Don't disappoint me. This was the first time Ouyang Shuo referred to himself as me. In accordance with his previous promise, he gave martial scholar Wu a special reward. No matter how he thought about it, he couldn't think of anything more symbolic than this armor. Sure enough, Nyoda was so excited that he couldn't speak coherently. He received the tray with trembling hands and placed it on the ground beside him. He respectfully expressed his gratitude. Jun Shang's gift, I will never dare to forget it. I will sacrifice my life to repay Jun Shang. Good, Ouyang Shuo exclaimed. Nyoda, listen to my order. I will obey Lord's order. Nyoda did not hesitate. As the military's martial champion, what he lacked the least was courage. Under this kind of atmosphere, even if Jun Shang ordered him to lead troops to attack Wangsheng, Nyoda wouldn't even frown. The city-state of Yunnan has invaded our borders. This crime cannot be forgiven. I order you to lead the 5th Division of the Imperial Guard Corps as the vanguard and assemble at the Dragon Stallion Army's encampment. Ouyang Shuo's words were shocking. Invading the border was just an excuse Ouyang Shuo had found. Of course, it wasn't completely fabricated. After all, at Ouyang Shuo's level, he disdained lying. In fact, it was a special incident planned by Bai Qi, the Military Intelligence Department, and the Chamberlain of Ceremonies. A month ago, the Lord of Qiubei City of Mengding County suddenly led his troops to invade the border of Jianan County. He killed more than 300 people and destroyed 2 villages. Then, he fled back to his territory. General Bai Qi, who was in charge of guarding the western border of the territory, was furious when he heard the news. He ordered to punish the culprit. However, Qiubei City was a member of the city-state of Yunnan. Since it had committed a crime, the city-state would naturally take the blame. Because of the confrontation between Shanghai City and the city-state of Yunnan, there were even cheers within the city-state. Bai Qi sent a letter asking the city-state of Yunnan to hand over the culprit, but it didn't work. So, the matter dragged on like this. Except for the person involved, everyone had almost forgotten about it. Unexpectedly, as soon as Ouyang Shua came back, he brought up the old matter again. Before the ministers could react, he brazenly declared war on the city-state of Yunnan. The intention was really thought-provoking. Yes, Nyota did not think about it. He only wanted to make contributions on the battlefield and live up to the Lord's grace. After the decree was made, Nyota tactfully retreated to the last row of the generals. Ouyang Shua returned to the main seat and ordered again, "General Hua, here." Hua Tsubing's eyes flashed. He looked heroic and full of vigor. After coming to the territory, Hua Tsubing had only led his troops to Star State County to test his skills. He did not have the chance to campaign on the battlefield again. The battle that he had been looking forward to had finally arrived. In this campaign against the city-state of Yunnan, General Bai Qi will be the main general, and you will be the vanguard general. You will lead the Imperial Guard Army to escort the supplies and then follow them to the Dragon Stallion Army's encampment. Ouyang Shua had a strange look in his eyes. Hua Tsubing showed off his abilities and was too unyielding. Thus, after appointing Hua Tsubing to lead the Imperial Guard Army, Ouyang Shua had intentionally or unintentionally hidden this divine general. Just like that, the genius general whose name shook the world and who was loved by thousands of girls suddenly disappeared from the sight of the players. He was hidden deep in the palace courtyard of the royal city, and no one could see him. For a period of time, there were even protests on the forums against Ouyang Shua's actions of hiding him. "Hua Hua is ours. Give me back my Hua Hua." Similar denunciations never stopped. The Hua Hua fan club became one of the most popular fan clubs on the forums. According to the Black Snake Guard's intelligence, Bai Hua was actually a core member of this fan club. When Ouyang Shua heard the news, he did not know whether to laugh or cry. It seemed that Bai Hua really was Hua Tsubing's fangirl. He did not know what kind of waves Hua Tsubing's trip to the Yunnan battlefield would cause. "Yes, Your Majesty." Hua Tsubing did not think too much about it and readily accepted the edict. In every battle, the vanguard general would be the vanguard, which was in line with Hua Tsubing's temperament. It was finally time for the genius general in history to show his brilliance. Ouyang Shua had forcefully turned a proper court meeting into a pre-war mobilization. There was no doubt that once the court meeting ended, the news of Shanghai City declaring war on the city-state of Yunnan would spread throughout the entire China region. At that time, the entire southern region would be shaken as if there was a magnitude 8 earthquake. This was exactly Ouyang Shua's intention. If the Imperial Guard wanted to reach the Dragon Stallion Army's encampment, they would need to pass through Lian, Sun, and Zhenan counties, which would take at least half a month. Therefore, the real battle would not begin so soon. Even so, the civil officials were somewhat puzzled by the emperor's high-profile mobilization of troops. Normally speaking, the emperor should have quietly mobilized the army and waited for everything to be ready before launching a surprise attack. With such great fanfare, wasn't it obvious that the enemy would be on guard and have an extra hand to prepare? Du Ruhui and the others, on the other hand, looked indifferent. This plan was not something Ouyang Shua had come up with on the spur of the moment, but the result of careful planning by the General Military Department. After discussing the mobilization of troops, Ouyang Shua changed the topic and said, "Summon Liu M.O." Summon Liu M.O., Deputy Director of the 7th Research Institute, into the hall. Liu M.O. entered and similarly bowed. "Greetings, Your Majesty." "Let's begin." Ouyang Shua had already briefed Liu M.O. yesterday, so there was no need to repeat it. "Yes, Your Majesty." Liu M.O. nodded and clapped his hands toward the door. Immediately, the divine martial guards in charge of guarding the Protectorate office panted as they carried a steam engine, a loom, and a blackboard into the hall. "What is this?" Seeing such a monster, the officials were baffled, and they had blank looks on their faces. Ouyang Shua sighed in his heart when he saw this. The lineup of civil and military officials in Shanghai City could be said to be luxurious. But even so, there were still shortcomings. Whether it was the civil officials like Xiao He or the military officials like Huo Zhubing, they were all very unfamiliar with the term technology. Apart from Zhang Tingyu, the only ones who had truly seen the technology of the foreigners were the surrendered generals of the Taiping army. Ouyang Shua's voyage had given Xiao He and the others a new understanding of the world. Even so, they still did not have a clear concept of the Industrial Revolution. Their thinking was still stuck within the framework of the unified thinking of respecting the king and suppressing the barbarians. They basically had no understanding of the role of technology in promoting productivity. Because of this, the advancement of industrialization in the territory had been slow, which made Ouyang Shua very dissatisfied. The root cause was that the ministers of the territory did not understand industrialization. Now that the territory had the steam engine, loom, and even the aircraft manufacturing technology, it was the time to vigorously develop industry. For a period of time in the future, the territory's finance, policies, resources, and so on must be tilted toward industry. Therefore, Ouyang Shua had to unify the understanding of the ministers. After all, the ones who were really doing the work were the group of ministers. If they were not open-minded, the territory would not be able to industrialize. Ouyang Shua could not possibly replace them and let the players replace them, right? That was even more unrealistic. Liu Mo was a technological geek. Even in the imperial court, he did not lie. He used the small blackboard and began to teach the ministers. It was a unique scientific lecture. Logically speaking, Liu Mo's foundation was very deep. Moreover, he was not a rigid person. He knew that the lecture was a group of noobs. The entire lecture went from simple to complex. Coupled with real objects and hand-drawn drawings, it became even more vivid. Such a scene could be considered the first time in the ancient setting of the world. P.S. Late update apologies. Chapter 687. Liu Mo's lecture lasted for an hour. Ouyang Shua sat upright in the seat of honor, calmly observing the reactions of the ministers in the hall. Some were interested, some were confused, some were truly listening attentively, and there were also some who appeared to be attentive, but were actually just dealing with it. The industrialization of the territory would not be smooth sailing. Ouyang Shua did not follow the usual practice of setting up a new organization to promote the industrialization of the territory. It was still handled by the Industry and Development Department under the General Administration of Finance. The only change was that an old expert from the 7th Research Institute would be transferred to the Industry and Development Department as the deputy director. He would be responsible for coordinating the work of the Protectorate of the Southern Border and the 7th Research Institute. Ouyang Shua did not choose Liu Mo. This sworn brother of his was a pure technological geek and would not be able to do such a thing. Liu Mo retreated and the court continued. The lecture was only the beginning. It was also to demonstrate Ouyang Shua's will as a king. The officials in the hall were all smart people and could naturally understand the deeper meaning behind it. Next, the 7th Research Institute would carry out similar literacy campaigns throughout the territory. Only by unifying the knowledge of the entire territory could the industrialization of the territory be sped up. Shanghai City has just been promoted to a third-ranked city and has a population shortage of 1 million people. I want to fill this gap in half a year. Does anyone have any objections? Ouyang Shua threw out another difficult problem. As soon as he finished speaking, the officials looked at each other. May I ask why the Lord is in such a hurry? Xiaoyi stepped out and asked. Shanghai City had been promoted from a second-ranked city to a third-ranked city for a year. In the eyes of the officials, they could follow the prescribed order, and there was no need to rush things. When Shanghai City is promoted to a capital city, it will be the opportunity for the territory to establish a nation. Ouyang Shua did not hide his ambition and announced his plan for the first time to the officials. The officials were excited, and some of the old officials even had tears in their eyes. The concept of a nation in ancient China was very important. It was one of the symbols of the unification of the world. Without a nation, the old officials always felt that something was missing and were unable to unite the will of the country. To the territory, establishing a nation was a groundbreaking event. Ouyang Shua's announcement in front of everyone caused an uproar. To the officials, this was the best explanation and commendation for this court meeting. All the doubts he had just now were swept away. The ministers burst forth with even greater enthusiasm than Ouyang Shua's and worked together to solve the population shortage problem. Your Majesty, this humble subject thinks that we can transfer some people from the various counties to Shanghai City. The one who spoke was Du Quan, the director of the Household Registration Department of the Internal Affairs Department. The Department of Household Registration was in charge of the population, so it naturally had the most right to speak. In this kind of court meeting, as a young official, Du Quan could not help but want to show off. You can't. Unexpectedly, Xiao He immediately objected. Such an action is no different from killing the goose that lays the golden eggs to catch the fish. The population of each county has been growing slowly, and it's not easy for us to catch our breath. How can we just transfer them around? In the wilderness, apart from the refugees that spawned, there was almost no natural growth. After playing the game for 10 years, even if the natives had already accelerated their growth, it was only enough for one generation of babies to grow into adults. Xiaoyi's words made sense. Throughout the entire territory, only Shanghai City, Cliff Mountain City, and Ocean Suppressing City could continuously spawn refugees after using the village creation token. The only special thing was that North Sea City was a subsidiary city. Then there were the cities that used the integration token, including Lianzhou County's Tianfeng City, Yishui County, and Duanren City. Finally, there were the overseas cities like Lion City, Friendship City, and Bay City that could spawn refugees. Compared to the territory's 7 counties, the hundreds of cities were really few and far between. Du Quan's suggestion was indeed inappropriate. Du Quan's face turned red, and she did not know how to refute. Seeing this, Wei Yang frowned. Du Quan's poor performance made him, the director of the Internal Affairs Department, lose face. Even so, Wei Yang still had to help Du Quan out. Chief Xiao's words make sense, but they're not absolute. Your Majesty, this humble subject suggests that we transfer an appropriate number of people from Lianzhou County's North Sea City, Tianfeng City, Yishui County, and Duanren City to Shanghai City. In addition, the population of Ocean Suppressing City can also be transferred. As the director of the Internal Affairs Department, Wei Yang obviously had a good grasp of the territory's population distribution. He did not mention Cliff Mountain City, because the population of Cliff Mountain City had to cover the entire Cheongzhou County, so it was not appropriate to transfer them. Feasible. Ouyang Shua nodded. He did not take the secret confrontation between Wei Yang and Xiao He to heart. He said lightly, this matter will be led by the Internal Affairs Department, with Lianzhou County and Ocean Suppressing City cooperating. Yes, Your Majesty. Lianzhou County Chief Wei Ran and Ocean Suppressing City Chief Song Wen stepped forward to receive the order. However, compared to Song Wen's calmness, Wei Ran's expression was somewhat stiff. Transferring a large number of people at once would make Lianzhou County's status even lower than Shanghai City's. This was the disadvantage of being an official under the emperor. Relocating the population is like tearing down the east wall to pay the west wall. It will not solve the root of the problem. Does anyone have any other suggestions? The shortage of 1 million people could not be solved with just a few immigrants. Moving 200,000 people out of the 5 cities was already the limit. This humble subject suggests that we go to Royal City to recruit people. Wei Yang answered this question in place of Du Quan. How do we do that? Shanghai City had already gone to Royal City several times to recruit talents. However, they only recruited technical talents or civil and military officials, so the number of people they recruited was not huge. However, they had never gone to Royal City to recruit the basic population on a large scale. Let's use this industrial revolution as an opportunity. Wei Yang had a sharp mind. He was one of the ministers who had the most thorough understanding of the prospects of the steam engine and the loom. In an instant, Wei Yang applied what he had learned. The revolution that the loom would bring to the textile industry was disruptive. With the loom, there was no longer a need for professional technical talents to weave cotton cloth. As long as the commoners were diligent enough, they could take up the post with a little training. This would greatly reduce the industry's barriers to entry. This would definitely be very attractive to the commoners of Royal City. We can give it a try. Ouyang Shuo did not deny it. The Census Department will be in charge of this matter. Other than immigration, they will also be responsible for their resettlement. If that's the case, why don't we take this opportunity to upgrade the Census Department? Wei Yang suggested. What do you mean? Ouyang Shuo remained calm. This was the first time that a minister took the initiative to propose a restructuring of the territory structure. It was very meaningful. Ouyang Shuo could not guess whether Wei Yang came prepared or improvised. The current Census Department's responsibilities are too narrow. It is only in charge of the territory's household register. The welfare, labor, customs, and other matters related to the household register are all outside the system. Wei Yang explained very clearly. Therefore, I suggest that the Census Department be upgraded to the Civil Affairs Department. It will be in charge of household register, civil army, customs, rural labor, general labor, rehabilitation, disaster relief, village pavilion chief, elderly, widows, orphans, control the poor, encourage farming, confer nobility, respect for filial piety, ban extravagance, ban generous burials, and other matters. The term Civil Affairs Department had existed since ancient times. Compared to the Civil Affairs Department of modern society, although there were differences in terms of work, the basic matters had not changed for thousands of years. Wei Yang's suggestion hit the nail on the head. Ouyang Shuo's eyes lit up. What does Minister Xiao think? Ouyang Shuo did not immediately make a decision. As the chief of the administration, Xiao He still had the right to speak on the restructuring of the organization. It would not be appropriate for Ouyang Shuo to bypass Xiao He in the court. After a long period of experience, Ouyang Shuo had a more thorough understanding of the rules of the court. Chief Wei's words make sense. I agree. Xiao He did not hesitate and directly nodded in agreement. He did not pester endlessly. Although this would increase the authority of the Civil Affairs Department, Xiao He did not hesitate when it was time to lower his head. All right, the matter is decided. Ouyang Shuo immediately made a decision. The specific organization and structure will be discussed by the two of you. Today, we will only discuss one matter. Does anyone have a recommendation for the chief of the Civil Affairs Department? Du Quan's performance was obviously not enough to advance further. It was already good enough that he could maintain his position as the chief of the Census Department under the Civil Affairs Department. Therefore, no one thought that Du Quan would be promoted. The Lord's words had once again proved this point. Ouyang Shuo had been away from the territory for half a year. The territory was not a pool of stagnant water. In the past half a year, there were a few historical talents who came because of the reputation. Some of them had been arranged to stay in the post house, waiting for Ouyang Shuo's decision. Those who were not arranged to stay were naturally great talents. Although Ouyang Shuo asked this question, the only ones who had the right to speak were Xiao He and Wei Yang. One was in charge of the appointment and inspection of the territory officials, while the other was the chief of the Civil Affairs Department. Even the chief of finance, family, could not intervene. This time, Wei Yang came prepared. He did not hide anything and directly submitted a recommendation. Reporting to the Lord, this humble subject recommends a person. He is Pei Yun, who came to seek refuge with my clan brother, Pei Ju. Pei Yun. Ouyang Shuo tried hard to recall the historical records of Pei Yun. Like Xing Province's county chief Pei Ju, Pei Yun was also born in Hedong Wenxi's Pei clan. He started working as an official in the Chun dynasty and was appointed as a general and commander of Xingning. After the Qin dynasty was destroyed by Sui when Emperor Yang Jian made an exception and promoted Pei Yun to the position of Yitong. After that, Pei Yun served as the provincial governor of Yang, Ji, and Di provinces. After Sui Yang Emperor Yang Guang ascended the throne, he appointed Pei Yun as the Grand Minister and then the Assistant Minister of the Ministry of Civil Affairs. In the 14th year of Day, the right garrison General Yu Wenji and Sima Dikan started a mutiny in Jiangdu to kill the emperor. Pei Yun was killed along with Sui Yang Emperor and the other ministers. Compared to his brother Pei Ju, Pei Yun was slightly more lackluster. The only political achievement he could bring out was probably the reform of the household registration system. When Pei Yun was the assistant minister of the Ministry of Civil Affairs, the lack of household registration among the people was a serious problem, which seriously affected the imperial court's financial revenue and hindered the development of production. It became a major social problem at that time. Because Pei Yun had been a provincial governor for a few years, he was more familiar with the inside story. Therefore, he proposed a set of measures to verify household registration, which was also known as the judging by appearance method. After these measures were put into practice, they received very obvious results. 443,000 soldiers were added to the accounts, and 1,641,500 new residents were added. Even so, Pei Yun was not considered a good official. Pei Yun catered to Sui Yang Emperor's liking and did many things that brought disaster to the country and the people. In order to cater to Sui Yang Emperor, Pei Yun expanded the Yu Fu on a large scale. He changed the old system of Emperor 1 and expanded the Yu Fu to more than 30,000 people for Emperor Yang Emperor's enjoyment. After being promoted to the position of imperial censor, Pei Yun was involved in secrets and destroyed the legal system. He used words to convict people and exonerate them. He had absolute power over people's lives and made arbitrary decisions, which facilitated and deepened Sui Yang Emperor's autocratic rule. As a result, evil people became crafty and became friends. Therefore, Ouyang Shuo naturally had to be cautious when using Pei Yun. Chapter 688. Compared to her brother Pei Ju, Pei Yun's reputation was mixed. Wei Yang recommended Pei Yun because of her experience in civil affairs. Pei Yun was qualified to be in charge of the newly established Civil Affairs Bureau, but he was afraid that other problems would arise. The only difference from the past was that Pei Yun was not in charge of the central government. The Administrative Bureau will discuss it. If there are no problems, then approve the appointment. Ouyang Shuo made the final decision. He decided to trust Wei Yang's judgment. Yes, Your Majesty. The Administrative Bureau Chief, Zhang Tingyu, nodded. To Zhang Tingyu, this was not a good job. From Jun Shang's expression, Zhang Tingyu can't judge what Jun Shang's attitude towards Pei Yun is. Did he really want to put her in an important position, or did he want to give Wei Yang face? If the Administrative Bureau's evaluation went against the Lord's will, then he, the Administrative Bureau Chief, would not have a good time. Ouyang Shuo ignored Zhang Tingyu's thoughts and continued. Subject Wei's suggestion to use industrialization as an opportunity to recruit workers in Royal City is a good idea. Even so, there is still a large shortage of people. Does anyone have any other ideas? This time, the officials looked at each other in dismay. The suggestion of making a fuss could not be put on the table in this kind of court meeting. What the Lord wanted was a big plan and a big plan. But such a plan was not something that could be easily thought of. Du Quan's encounter just now served as a warning to all the courtiers. One must not speak carelessly in the court. Otherwise, losing face was a small matter, but losing their official position was a big matter. Why? Is there no one who can share this Lord's burden? Ouyang Shuo emphasized. This frightened the officials, and they bowed in unison. We are useless. Please forgive us, Your Majesty. All right. Ouyang Shuo waved his hand, somewhat discouraged. Since none of you can think of anything, then follow my suggestion. Bring in mutants. Shanghai City will be open to more mutants and attract them to settle here. Your Majesty, this. Zhang Wenzhong wanted to say something, but hesitated. If you have something to say, say it. This official is worried that a large number of mutants will be a huge challenge to Shanghai City security. Zhang Wenzhong said cautiously. Moreover, the city guards are not in Shanghai City, so Ouyang Shuo was enraged when he heard this. His voice wasn't loud, but it was cold and threatening. What? Could it be that Shanghai City's public security is so bad that it can't even control the mutants? Suddenly, A pressure as heavy as a mountain suddenly descended upon the imperial court. It was as if a bright and sunny sky had suddenly been struck by lightning. The ministers felt uneasy. Zhang Wenzhong's face was even paler. Trembling, he said, "I am useless. Please punish me." Ouyang Shua ignored Zhang Wenzhong and turned to look at Wei Yang. The Internal Affairs Department implements the Territory Code, which treats inhumans and natives equally. You don't even have the confidence to take care of the inhumans? No problem. Wei Yang dared to make a military pledge. Ouyang Shua nodded. His expression slightly relaxed as he said in a deep voice, "Ministers, you must understand the truth. The army is used to fight wars, not to act as bodyguards for cities. Today, I will make this clear. Even if the city guards return, they will no longer be stationed in Shanghai City. They will be stationed outside the city. The security of the city can only be handled by the Internal Affairs Department and the bailiffs. Placing your hopes on the army is tantamount to abandoning yourself." "Yes, your majesty." In an instant, all the ministers bowed in unison. In the imperial court, Ouyang Shua's every word and action affected the ministers' thoughts. When the emperor was angry, lightning flashed and thunder roared. The ministers could clearly feel that after half a year, the emperor's majesty had taken shape. The appearance of the emperor was clear to the heavens and earth. This was due to Ouyang Shua's experience and accumulation. It was also due to the dragon vein spiritual chi baptism, the emperor's seal, the yellow emperor's canon of internal medicine, and the dragon of destiny. The quantitative change had already caused a qualitative change. The emperor's majesty was as high as the mountain and as deep as the sea. It was majestic and inviolable. Only such an emperor could talk about establishing a country. Otherwise, even if Shanghai City was promoted to a capital city, it would only be an illusion. As of this moment, Xiao He and the other ministers could clearly see a new dynasty rising up in the wildlands, a dynasty brimming with energy and vigor, a dynasty that could shake the entire wildlands. A new era has arrived. At this moment, other than being overwhelmed by emotions, there was no other emotion that could be described. The great cause is within reach, and the people can look forward to it. Some of the ministers' eyes were brimming with tears. If Ouyang Shua went to check the loyalty of the ministers at this moment, he would be shocked to find that their loyalty had skyrocketed by 5 to 15 points. Only then could the emperor's majesty be displayed. Ouyang Shua's abandonment of the army and putting the bailiffs in important positions was not without reason. In modern society, the police and armed police were the ones who maintained the security of the city. Except for special times or times of war, the army would not intervene in the city. Otherwise, it would not be a prosperous era, but a chaotic era. In fact, in ancient times, there were also police and armed police, but the names were different. They were bailiffs. Specifically speaking, the bailiffs in ancient times could be divided into 3 categories. Each category had a specific responsibility. The first was the Constable Swifthand, or Constable for short. They were responsible for summoning defendants, witnesses, arresting suspects, searching for evidence, and so on. In modern society, the work and responsibilities of the criminal police were similar. The constable belonged to the disciplinary department under the Internal Affairs Department. The second was the soap guards, similar to today's bailiffs or the security department of the Public Security Department. The soap guards were mainly responsible for following the officers and protecting them. During the trial, they stood on both sides of the hall to maintain order, escort the criminals, and carry out torture and beatings. In the early Ming Dynasty, these people wore long black robes and square hats, with a peacock feather in their ears or some yellow tassels. This was where the name soap guards came from. According to the Ming Dynasty's 3 Talents Conference, this was originally the attire of the Yuan Dynasty's lascivious nobles. Zhu Yuanzhang used this as a lowly servant's attire to look down on the Yuan Dynasty's lascivious nobles. Later, the black color was changed to green, but the name never changed. The soap guards belonged to the disciplinary department under the Internal Affairs Department. The third was the strong force, responsible for guarding the city gates, yamen, important warehouses, prisons, and other key departments, patrolling the streets of the cities and towns, similar to the armed police of today. Previously, the responsibility of the strong force was the responsibility of the city defense force. But after Ouyang Shuo proposed a reform, it was transferred to the direct jurisdiction of the Internal Affairs Department. From this, it was not difficult to conclude that the ancient yamen had a full range of types, and if the operation was smooth, they could shoulder the responsibility of maintaining the city's law and order. The problem was that in ancient times, yamen laborers were the same as prostitutes and actors, classified as lowly professions, and ordinary people were not willing to marry them. In ancient times, yamen laborers did not have a salary, only a meager food allowance. Even so, there were still a lot of people who racked their brains to enter the ranks of yamen laborers. However, in ancient times, yamen laborers had an inheritance system. Every quota had a fixed number, and if the father died, the son would take over. Why were yamen laborers so popular even though they were lowly? There was no other reason. It was because when they carried out their duties, they had too many methods to exploit the common people. There was plenty of profit, and they did not care if they had a salary or not. Ouyang Shuo had a clear understanding of this flaw. Therefore, since the establishment of the public order department in the territory, yamen laborers were basically soldiers who had transferred over. They were of high quality and received the same salary as the basic clerks. This way, the yamen laborers' misdeeds were prevented to the greatest extent. Before this, Ouyang Shuo had already ordered an expansion of the yamen laborers. Now, it seemed that the city guards were still somewhat worried about the mutants and were full of vigilance. This, if traced back to the source, was related to Ouyang Shuo's attitude towards the players. Speaking of which, they really could not blame others. Shanghai City has been promoted, and the population has skyrocketed. The yamen laborers must also be expanded. Ouyang Shuo softened his tone and said to Du Ruhui, "The General Administration of Military Affairs will discuss whether it is possible to directly disband the Lianzhou County Guard Division. The defense of the entire Lianzhou Basin, including Mulan Fortress, will be handed over to the City Guard Division. It should not be a big problem." Du Ruhui nodded. The current City Guard Division had 5 full divisions, and they had been training in Heartstone City, so their combat strength was extraordinary. Du Ruhui was still confident in guarding the Lianzhou Basin. "That's good." Ouyang Shuo nodded. He liked Du Ruhui's straightforwardness. The Lianzhou County Guard Division has more than 13,000 soldiers. This time, they will all be transferred to yamen laborers and integrated into Shanghai City's Internal Affairs Department. Ouyang Shuo looked at the anxious Zhang Wenzhong and asked, "How about it? Are you confident now?" "Thank you for your grace, Marquis." Zhang Wenzhong did not know what to say, so he just kept nodding. Just like that, the matter was settled. In fact, the opening of Shanghai City was something that Ouyang Shuo had been planning for a long time. All he lacked was an opportunity. Shanghai City's promotion was an opportunity. A conservative estimate was that there would be no less than 400,000 players, although doing so would inevitably summon the spies of the various territories to Shanghai City, causing more uncertainties and variables to arise in the city. It was inevitable that the spies would be summoned to Shanghai City. However, those who were really willing to settle in Shanghai City were mainly civilian players. Ouyang Shuo was the representative of the civilian players in the China region, and countless players dreamed of settling in Shanghai City. However, Shanghai City's censorship was too strict, and it was almost not open to the public. Currently, there were mainly 2 types of people who settled in Shanghai City. The first type was the members of the Falling Moon Society, who were all professional players who were recruited. The second type was the team of scientists and high-level intellectuals, including their relatives. The next step was to open Shanghai City to civilian players. During the Tang Dynasty, Chang'an City was open to all. There was no reason that Shanghai City did not have the courage and confidence to accept players. As such, a more open and tolerant Shanghai City was quietly rising. Chapter 689. By the time they finished discussing the issue of filling up the population of Shanghai City, it was already noon. Today's court assembly will end here. Ouyang Shuo was straightforward. Court dismissed. After the court meeting ended, Ouyang Shuo returned to the rear hall. In the pavilion, Song Jia was chatting with a middle-aged woman. They were chatting happily and seemed to be on good terms with each other. Ouyang Shuo smiled when he saw this. After the marriage, his wife, Song Jia, stopped acting like a chivalrous woman and began to appear as a marquise/duchess. She had close relations with the female members of the officials and eunuchs in the territory and became Ouyang Shuo's good wife. In addition, Song Jia had a clear distinction between public and private affairs. She did things in an orderly manner and was loved and respected by her subjects. With such a wife, what more can I ask for? Of course, Song Jia did not really give up on martial arts. Every day, she would attend morning and evening classes diligently. Coupled with the abundant resources of the protectorate, Song Jia's martial arts were progressing at a godly pace. The current Song Jia was very much like the legendary Sunflower Empress. Although she lived in seclusion in the imperial harem, her martial arts were extremely powerful, and her legend had spread throughout the pugilistic world. The two extraordinary women achieved the same result through different means. When she saw Ouyang Shuo, the middle-aged woman immediately stood up and saluted. Commoner woman, Xian greets Lord. Ouyang Shuo came to a sudden realization. He vaguely recalled that she was Hua Guang's wife, with Xian. At first glance, the woman was gentle, courteous, and had a graceful bearing. She didn't seem like the poisonous woman in history at all. On the soft mattress at the side, Binger was playing happily with a little girl. Hearing this sound, she raised her head and saw that her brother had returned. She called out crisply, "Brother!" Then she lowered her head and continued playing. Ouyang Shuo was helpless towards this younger sister who was currently in her rebellious phase. On the other hand, the little girl who was playing with Binger was exceptionally lively, with big eyes and long eyelashes. At such a young age, there was a hint of charm in her cuteness. It was no wonder that she became a femme fatale when she grew up. Chengjun greets Jiuanshang Gij. The little girl left the soft couch, arrived in front of Ouyang Shuo, and saluted him. Ouyang Shuo smiled when he heard that. This form of address was interesting. After thinking for a moment, he took out a green magnetic O-stone bracelet from his storage pouch and personally put it on Hua Chengjun. "Come here often in the future." "Thank you, Brother Jiuanshang." Hua Chengjun looked very happy. His little face was full of excitement. When Hua Xian saw this, his eyes also flashed with joy. To be able to receive Jiuanshang's personal reward, this is a great honor. Needless to say, the miraculous effects of the magnetic orb had long since spread throughout Shanghai City, and it was unknown how many women envied it. Ouyang Shuo did this because he really liked Hua Chengjun. Hua Chengjun was so smart and charming at such a young age, which was really lovable. The saying of femme fatale was merely a fabrication made up by scholars, and it was imposed on a weak woman. Ouyang Shuo was ashamed of it. Secondly, he wanted to use this opportunity to get closer to the Hua family. The two brothers, Hua Xubing and Hua Guang, were the civil and military ministers of the territory. This was especially true for Hua Xubing, who was all alone. Perhaps only his elder brother's family could bring him some warmth. Ouyang Shuo had heard that Hua Xubing was very fond of his niece, Hua Chengjun. The current Ouyang Shuo was no longer simple, no matter what he did. As soon as the Shanghai court assembly ended, the news spread throughout the China region, causing heated discussions. Some were excited, and some were terrified. The most excited were naturally the adventure-type players of the China region, especially the civilian players. Shanghai City, which they had been looking forward to for a long time, was finally open to them. In the hearts of the China region players, Shanghai City was already the safest city in the entire China region. Even a royal city would fall one day. Only Shanghai City would stand tall between heaven and earth. Just this alone was enough to make the players go crazy. Needless to say, with the opening of the Grand Line, Shanghai City had become a window to the outside world. The business opportunities in the city were simply everywhere. For a time, countless individual players, guilds, and players' chambers of commerce and other organizations flocked to the city. The first place to be breached was the office set up by Shanghai City in the Nine Kings City. The players were eager to know what the recruitment criteria of Shanghai City were. 400,000 seemed to be a lot, but in the face of a base of tens of millions of players, it seemed a little insignificant. Therefore, even if Shanghai City lowered the threshold, not everyone could enter. The next day, the Civil Affairs Department of the Protectorate of Southern Border issued 3 immigration principles, namely, priority for professional players, priority for chambers of commerce, and priority for those with a good reputation. Players who wanted to immigrate to Shanghai City had to first submit application materials to the Royal City Office. After the Civil Affairs Department passed the examination, they would issue a Shanghai City Household Registration Certificate. If it was a group, such as a Chamber of Commerce, guild, or a mercenary group, they could send out an application. This also meant that pure combat professional players, especially those with malicious PK records, would definitely be blocked by Shanghai City. On the contrary, some player chambers of commerce with a good reputation would be warmly welcomed by Shanghai City. Some small guilds and mercenary groups were also given priority to Shanghai City. And Shanghai City also had a cautious attitude toward lone wolves. A lone ranger, after all, would either have outstanding skills and be arrogant, or they would have an eccentric temperament. In short, they were not easy to manage. As for the top 10 guilds in the Nine Kings City, they were all blocked outside the gates of Shanghai City. Even if they set up branches in Shanghai City, they would not be allowed, including allied guilds like Snow Rose. If one were to use an inappropriate adjective to describe the immigrants brought in by Shanghai City this time, they were mainly middle class, or similar to small and medium-sized enterprises with a certain degree of vitality in reality. This was because these people had a certain amount of technical reserves or economic foundation, and they could further develop in Shanghai City. This way, both sides could achieve a win-win situation. The Bank of the Four Seas head, shopkeeper Meng Jida, had already said that as long as the conditions were right, the Bank of the Four Seas would be happy to provide low-interest loans to the player chambers of commerce and adventure groups in Shanghai City to support them in their expansion. This signal was undoubtedly great news for countless small and medium-sized chambers of commerce. Developing ocean trade required a large amount of funds, not to mention other things. Just buying merchant ships, hiring sailors, and purchasing goods was a huge expenditure. With the support of the Bank of the Four Seas, this was no longer a problem. In fact, when Ouyang Shua had just returned, Meng Jida had already explained this through a memorial. The Bank of the Four Seas' ability to absorb deposits was astonishing, and it was already somewhat unable to keep up with the pace by relying on the Lord's loans. Moreover, there was a certain risk of default on the Lord's loans. On the contrary, the player chambers of commerce and small adventure groups had always been a neglected loan market with huge potential. A single chamber of commerce might not need much capital, but with hundreds, thousands, or even tens of thousands of chambers of commerce stacked together, their capital requirements would be terrifying. Previously, whether it was the Bank of the Four Seas or the Huitong Bank, they would not lend to these chambers of commerce. Their concern was the ability of the small chambers of commerce to repay the loans, and they were worried that they would not be able to collect the loans. Therefore, Ouyang Shua did not immediately adopt Meng Jida's previous suggestion. Now, it was a good opportunity. Those that could be introduced into Shanghai City were all groups that had been screened and investigated by the Black Snake Guard. They were clean and had a good reputation. When they settled in Shanghai City, they would be bound by the territory code, and the fixed assets they purchased in the city would also be monitored by Shanghai City. In this way, the risk of default would be minimized. With the huge profits from ocean trade as the expectation, lending naturally became logical. In this way, not only did it solve the loan problem of the Bank of the Four Seas, but it also activated the small and medium-sized chambers of commerce, driving their rapid development, and thus the true prosperity of the Grand Line's ocean trade. Everything was intertwined with each other, forming a genius chain of interest. It could be foreseen that once this plan was successfully implemented, the trade of Shanghai City would take a big step forward. Shanghai City was destined to become a city full of vitality, a stage for passionate, energetic, and daring young people, and definitely not a retirement home for a group of players. This was also the slogan of the Civil Affairs Department. As soon as the slogan came out, it immediately resonated with countless players. At this moment, they truly felt that they were so close to the number one person in the China region. Shanghai City did not intend to give preferential treatment to the civilian players this time. This kind of thing could be understood, but it could not be said. Moreover, the elite level was not bad, and the civilian players were not all good. After experiencing so many experiences, Ouyang Shuo still had this basic understanding. He had long learned not to judge good and evil simply by groups and regions. As long as it was beneficial to the prosperity of Shanghai City, Ouyang Shuo would not refuse it. Yunnan Province, Tingyue County, Tengchong City. The emergency meeting of the four major city-states was currently being held in Tengchong City's mayor's mansion. The host of the meeting, Tengchong City's Lord Qin Fun, was also the rotating chairman of Yunnan City. When he suddenly received an urgent message, his face turned gloomy. Everyone. Qin Fun looked around the meeting and said with a grave expression, "I've just received news that Joker Wui has publicly announced in the imperial court that he wants to take revenge on our Yunnan City. The reason he used is the recent attack on the border of Zhejiang and County by Mengding County's North Chiu City." As he spoke, Qin Fun glanced at the Lord of North Chiu City, his expression becoming even more gloomy. As expected, he has already declared war? The one who spoke was the representative of Xiangnan City, south of Rosy Clouds. The moment they learned of Ouyang Shuo's return, they had already expected such a day to come. However, they did not expect it to come so quickly and so fiercely. "Is there any specific news?" South of Rosy Clouds asked. Joker Wui has already sent out his strongest army, the Imperial Guard Army, to the border to rendezvous with their Dragon Stallion Army. At the same time, Baihua has also publicly announced that he will advance and retreat with Shanghai City. Lingxi City's only field army has already set off for the border. The large meeting room suddenly became silent. Chapter 690. A war was about to break out. Shanghai City's actions were beyond the expectations of the other four city-states. "You will help us, right?" Qin Fun looked at the representatives of the other city-states with a nervous expression. "Brother Qin, don't worry. Lingnan City will support you. After returning, I will discuss with the Joint Conference of the Lords and transfer 150,000 allied troops to the border of Zhaoqing County to confront the Tiger Army of Shanghai City. If necessary, we will even attack Zhaoqing County and coordinate with your western battlefield." Ruan Ping was the first to express his stance. Ruan Ping's stance was not surprising at all. After Ouyang Shuo and Song Jia's wedding, Ruan Ping had become very stubborn and even possessed. He was always thinking about how to get rid of Shanghai City, which had become his inner demon. Xiangnan City-State will also take action. The 100,000 Allied troops stationed in Guilin County will immediately enter a state of war and be responsible for restraining the Leopard Tau Army of Shanghai City. The attitude of South of Rosy Clouds was somewhat ambiguous. South of Rosy Clouds only guaranteed to restrain the Leopard Army. In other words, if the Leopard Army did not take the initiative to attack, the Allied troops of Xiangnan City would also not move. In the end, the representative of North Sichuan City, Lord Shimin, was a little hesitant. Yes, we must support it. In this way, the Allied troops of North Sichuan City will remain vigilant. Half a year had passed, and unknown changes had already taken place within North Sichuan City. On the issue of Shanghai City, there were differences within the city-state. Even Lord Shimin was not willing to directly clash with Shanghai City. Qin Fun frowned when he saw this. Obviously, the attitude of the three major city-states did not satisfy Qin Feng. He said in a deep voice, "Restraining them will naturally be necessary, but is it possible for you to directly send troops to support us?" The enemy troops in front of Yunnan City included 2 legions of Shanghai City's Dragon Stallion Army, the Imperial Guard Army, and the Field Army of Lingxi City. There were a total of 280,000 elite troops. When the real war began, it was unknown whether the other legions of Shanghai City would participate. 2. Yunnan City-State. The 4 legions were a huge challenge. The allied troops of the city-state only numbered 100,000. If they added more, they would be able to form an army of 300,000. However, Qin Feng knew his own limits. He knew that their 300,000 troops were not the same concept as the 300,000 troops of Shanghai City. Be it in terms of combat power or equipment, both sides were vastly inferior. Not to mention, Shanghai City had directly used 2 divine generals, Bai Qi and Hua Tsubing, to command them. The cold-blooded butcher, the god of slaughter Bai Qi, and the genius general, the god of cavalry, Hua Tsubing. Just the thought of it was enough to make one shudder in fear. If Yunnan City-State were to face it alone, it would be difficult. At this moment, even south of rosy clouds was stuttering. "Brother Kaiyun, if the lips are gone, the teeth will be cold." Qin Feng's expression was anxious. South of rosy clouds sighed. "Cough. Brother Qin, it's not that we don't want to help. As you know, the military affairs of the city are decided by the joint conference of the lords, not by a single word. If they were dealing with a direct military threat from Shanghai City, the joint conference wouldn't face much resistance. But if we send reinforcements to our allies, I'm afraid it'll be very difficult." "That's right, Brother Qin. You also have to understand our difficulties." High official Shimin echoed. Even the most enthusiastic Ruan Ping did not utter a word. Lingnan City-State was not something that Ruan Ping had the final say in. It was complicated. Especially in the past 6 months, Ruan Ping had a vague feeling that there was a force within the city that was accumulating power and waiting for him to make a mistake. Therefore, although Ruan Ping was eager to intervene in the Yunnan battlefield, he was powerless. Qin Feng's expression was extremely ugly when he saw this. On one hand, he understood the concerns of Ruan Ping and the others. If he put himself in their shoes, it would be difficult for Yunnan City-State to send troops to their allies. On the other hand, Qin Feng felt bitterly disappointed that his allies did not help them. The emergency meeting of the 4 major city-states eventually ended on bad terms. The 3 major city-states only promised to be responsible for restraining the brave Tiger Army and the hidden Leopard Army of Shanghai City. As for the main battlefield, they were indeed powerless. "I have no choice but to fight to the death." After Qin Feng sent his allies away, a trace of determination flashed across his face. Shanghai City, the protectorate of the southern region. On the morning of August 24th, Ouyang Shua personally saw off the Imperial Guards. The Imperial Guards, led by Hua Tsubing, set off from the North Gate and marched majestically toward Mulan Fortress. This scene fell into the eyes of the secret agents of the various territories. A storm was brewing. In the afternoon, Ouyang Shua met with Zhang Tingyu and Wei Yang alone. After getting their explanations, he finally agreed to Pei Yun's appointment and officially appointed Pei Yun as the head of the Civil Affairs Bureau. Zhang Tingyu finally agreed to appoint Pei Yun as the head of the Civil Affairs Bureau. This was because if he refused, it would be equivalent to offending the head of the Civil Affairs Bureau, Wei Yang, and the governor of Xing Province, Pei Zhu. Moreover, in the Great Qing dynasty, it was too common for Pei Yun to flatter the emperor. Even Zhang Tingyu himself had to play along with Emperor Yongzheng's preferences. Under such circumstances, Zhang Tingyu had no reason to refuse Pei Yun's appointment. However, the emperor's cryptic smile still made Zhang Tingyu's heart tremble. As such, Wenxi's Pei family would have 2 people holding important positions in Shanghai City. Name: Pei Yun, king level, dynasty, Sui dynasty identity, civil official of Shanghai City, occupation, civil official loyalty, 70 commander, 45 martial power, 30 intelligence, 70 politics, 80 specialties. Civil affairs increased territorial administrative efficiency by 15, territory prestige by 10, territory civil affairs efficiency by 20. Evaluation. Pei Yun, a minister of the Sui dynasty. His father was in the north, and he was secretly invited to be the Sui dynasty spy. After entering the Sui dynasty, he opened a government office with 3 departments and became a provincial governor. He was known as capable and experienced. At the beginning of Emperor Yang's reign, he was conferred the title of Taichong Shaoqing. He was good at serving the emperor's will and increased the number of musicians to more than 30,000. He was moved to the Ministry of Civil Affairs and requested to set up a law to verify household registration. He obtained more than 200,000 servants and was appointed as the imperial censor and participated in court politics. He used the emperor's will to punish Yang Xuangan's remaining followers and killed tens of thousands of people. The law and discipline were greatly violated. He increased the number of imperial censors, and his eyes and ears were biased towards the prefectures. The evaluation of Pei Yun in the history books was not high. Pei Yun also became the first official appointed by Shanghai City with a tainted reputation. Whether he could control such a flattering official was also a test for Ouyang Shua. After all, when he arrived at the Hope Planet in the future, there was no attribute list or loyalty. The loyalty and evil of his subordinates all depended on Ouyang Shua's eyes. August 25th in the morning. While the southern border was in a state of mutual hostility, a system announcement disrupted the rhythm of the war. System announcement. The China region has successfully promoted 50 prefectures and triggered the military campaign system. The 6th military campaign, the Battle of Chibi, will officially begin in 3 days. Please look forward to it. Friendly reminder. The Battle of Chibi is a non-mandatory military campaign scenario mission. Only territories that have been promoted to prefectures are eligible to participate. The Battle of Chibi was the most famous battle in the history of the 3 kingdoms. If the victory of the war between Cao Cao and Yuan Shao, including the famous Battle of Guandu, was the turning point of Cao Cao's regime, then the Battle of Chibi was the turning point of Sun Lu's regime. After this battle, Liu Bei began to truly rise, and the Sun family of Jiangdong also became famous. However, the outside world had many misunderstandings about this epic battle because of the literary manipulation of the romance of the 3 kingdoms. First of all, Zhuge Liang's borrowing arrows with straw boats in the Battle of Chibi was completely untrue. However, borrowing arrows with straw boats was not groundless either. According to Pei Song's notes in the Records of the 3 Kingdoms, the biography of Lord Wu, in the 18th year of Jian, and which was 5 years after the Battle of Chibi, Cao Cao led his army south to attack Sun Wu. One day, Sun Quan took advantage of the thin mist on the river and rowed a light warship into the front line of Cao Cao's army to observe Cao Cao's deployment. Cao Cao was naturally suspicious. Seeing the mist lingering on the river and Sun Wu's solemn and dignified army, he was afraid that it was a trap and did not dare to fight. He ordered the bows and arrows to shoot at the Wu ships. Sun Quan's ship was soon covered with arrows. Because one side of the ship was heavily hit, it gradually tilted and was about to capsize. Sun Quan ordered the bow to turn around and let the other side take the arrows. After the hull stabilized, Sun Quan ordered the warships to line up and slowly leave. Cao Cao finally understood that he had been tricked. This was only a story about Sun Quan, and it was just a clever move in an emergency. Sun Quan did not plan to borrow arrows, and the history books did not mention straw boats. Borrowing arrows with straw boats was a fabrication. Zhuge Liang borrowing the east wind was even more ridiculous. In fact, in the history of the Battle of Chibi, the real commander was Zhou Yu. Zhuge Liang did not even participate in the battle. It was only because the author of the Romance of the 3 Kingdoms, Luo Guanzhong, had a special preference for Zhuge Liang. Therefore, some things were grafted on as Zhuge Liang and gradually deified him. Not only the Battle of Chibi, but even the empty fort stratagem was not Zhuge Liang's doing. Similarly, Zhou Yu beat Huang Gai was also non-existent. In the history of the Three Kingdoms, Huang Gai did not use the injury stratagem, but it was true that he faked a surrender to ensure that the unarmed fireboats would not be intercepted and that they could successfully approach Cao Cao's water stockade. Huang Gai submitted a letter to Cao Cao. Cao Cao easily believed Huang Gai's surrender because he believed that Huang Gai was once Sun Jian's subordinate and had seniority over Zhou Yu. Therefore, Huang Gai might be unwilling to submit to Zhou Yu. In addition, it was true that Cao Cao sent Jiang Gan, who was from the same prefecture as Zhou Yu, to persuade Zhou Yu, but not during the Battle of Chibi. When Pei Song wrote The Romance of the Three Kingdoms, he noted that it happened after the Battle of Chibi. Moreover, only Jiang Gan persuaded Zhou Yu to surrender, and he did not fall for Zhou Yu's sowing of dissension. Cai Mao and Zhang Yun were not involved either. In fact, they were not even Cao Cao's navy governors. Similarly, the difference in military strength between the two sides in the real Battle of Chibi was not as great as described in the Romance of the Three Kingdoms. The argument of winning with fewer troops was somewhat untenable. If there were overlord players who used the plot of the Romance of the Three Kingdoms to speculate and prepare for the Battle of Chibi, they would definitely suffer a huge setback. In his previous life, there were overlords who made such a joke. Chapter 691. The Battle of Chibi could be seen as a battle for the inheritance of Jingzhou among the Chao, Lu, and Sun families. Before the war, Liu Biao basically occupied Jingzhou. Liu Bei squatted in Xinya and occupied the north gate of Jingzhou. At the end of the 12th year of Jian, he recruited Zhuge Liang and began to covet Liu Biao's territory. After pacifying the north, Cao Cao returned to rest and reorganized his navy in preparation for a southern expedition. Over the years, Sun Quan traveled up the river to attack Huangzhou. At the beginning of the 13th year of Jian, he finally killed Huangzhou and knocked on the eastern gate of Jingzhou. The three parties were eyeing Liu Biao's territory like tigers eyeing tigers. The Jingzhou magistrate, Liu Biao, was old and seriously ill. He no longer had the elegance of riding alone to take up his post. Lu Cong was chosen as the successor to Jingzhou, while Lu Qi was required to leave Zhenjiang and Xia. Under these circumstances, Jingzhou was basically lost. In the 7th month of the 13th year of Jian, Cao Cao led his army on an expedition to the south. Soon after, Liu Biao died of illness. Lu Cong intended to surrender to Cao Cao, but Liu Bei, who was stationed at Fancheng, did not know about it. After Cao Cao's army passed Wancheng, Liu Bei heard the news and immediately fled. At the same time, Guan Yu led the navy to Jiangling along the Han River. Cao Cao successfully marched into Xiangyang and accepted Lu Cong's surrender. After that, he pursued Liu Bei. Along the way, Liu Bei took in some of Lu Cong's former clansmen, troops, and retainers. Soon, the number of refugees reached over 100,000. They moved very slowly, only 5 li a day. Cao Cao knew that there was a large amount of supplies in Jiangling. He was afraid that Liu Bei would seize these supplies first. Therefore, he left his army behind and led 5,000 elite cavalrymen to pursue Liu Bei's troops for a day and a night. They caught up with Liu Bei's troops at Dangyang and Changban, capturing the soldiers and refugees. In the novel, the Battle of Changban Slope could be said to be heavily colored and extremely exaggerated. There was Zhang Fei who roared 3 times and scared off hundreds of thousands of Cao soldiers. There was also Zhao Yun who charged into Cao's camp alone. In this battle, Zhang Fei became a god, and Zhao Yun became a god. Naturally, the real history did not have such an exaggerated plot. Back then, only 5,000 elite Cao cavalrymen were pursuing Liu Bei. In history, Zhao Yun could not be called a god of war. He was more like a high-class bodyguard. After the Battle of Changban ended, Liu Bei led several dozen men to the ferry crossing of the Han River. Coincidentally, he ran into Guan Yu's navy. He could not be bothered to occupy the supplies in Jiangling anymore. Instead, he headed straight for Jiangxia to meet up with Lu Qi. Cao Cao pursued Liu Bei all the way and successfully occupied Jiangling. The greatest turning point of the war appeared in Jiangling. Cao Cao followed the advice of his advisor, Jia Su, and stationed himself in Jiangling. He began to appease the people of Jing province and stabilize his rule. This pause lasted for 2 whole months. Within these 2 short months, Liu Bei and Sun Quan successfully formed an allied army to fight against Cao Cao. As a result, the situation at the end of the Eastern Han Dynasty was completely changed, resulting in the subsequent Battle of Red Cliffs and even the establishment of the Three Kingdoms. If Cao Cao had chosen to continue his pursuit, the Three Kingdoms War would have been over. Even if Liu Bei was lucky enough to escape, he would have no place to stand. Similarly, if Cao Cao had not been in such a hurry and waited until winter, his army would have been more prepared to avoid the plague and the east wind. Then, the defeat at the Red Cliffs would not have happened. Therefore, Pei Songji would sigh with emotion in the records of the Three Kingdoms. Wu Ji, Zhou Yu's biography. The defeat of Cao Cao's army at the Battle of Red Cliffs was, in fact, fate, and not something that could be reversed by human strength. In the 10th month of the 13th year of Jian, and the allied army of Sun and Lu sailed up the river from Jiangxia, preparing to meet Cao Cao's army. Both sides encountered each other near the Red Cliffs, and a battle broke out on the Yangtze River. In the first battle, the Cao army suffered a crushing defeat. First, there was an epidemic of diseases in the Cao army's camp, and the soldiers' combat power was greatly reduced. Secondly, the Cao army was mainly made up of soldiers from the north and was not good at fighting on the water. Thirdly, the territory on the Yangtze River was limited, and it was not suitable for an army to spread out. Cao Cao's army had a large army, but they were unable to deploy it. In the end, they lost the battle on the water. After the defeat, the Cao army set up camp on the north bank at the Wulin Forest. At the same time, Zhou Yu's army set up camp at the Red Cliffs on the south bank. Both sides faced each other across the river. Therefore, the real Battle of the Red Cliffs should have happened at the Wulin Forest and not at the Red Cliffs. It was only because the Red Cliffs was too famous that it was called that way. Next up was the most exciting part of the Battle of Red Cliffs, the burning of the Red Cliffs. Cao Cao's warships were connected from head to tail. Once they caught fire, it would be very difficult to evacuate them. Next up was Zhou Yu's counterattack. Huang Gai led his fleet to pretend to surrender and approach Cao Cao's camp. When he got close, he used the wind to set fire. Using the east wind that should not have appeared in winter, the fire destroyed Cao Cao's ambition to conquer the world. After the battle, Cao Cao knew that he could no longer occupy the Yangtze River. Therefore, he burned the remaining warships to prevent them from supporting the enemy. After this battle, part of the main force that Cao Cao brought to Jiangling and Liu Biao's navy were basically finished. Although there were casualties from the battle due to the plague, it was not to the extent that they were seriously injured. After the battle, Cao Cao escaped by land and returned to Jiangling. He left Cao Run behind to defend while he returned to the north. A year after Zhou Yu and Cao Run fought, Zhou Yu defeated Cao Run and occupied Nanjun. This meant that Cao Cao's forces lost this section of the Yangtze River. After that, Cao Cao's forces stabilized at Fancheng, Xiangyang, and controlled this section of the Hanshui River. Although they lost a battle and lost the occupied Jingnan and part of the Jianghan Plains, they still managed to protect Jingzhou in the north. During this period, Guan Yu's forces worked together with Zhou Yu's forces to harass Cao Cao's reinforcements. This made it difficult for Cao Cao's forces to contact Cao Run. Because the counties in Jingnan were isolated from Cao Cao's forces, Liu Bei took the opportunity to occupy them. At this point, Cao Cao, Liu Bei, and Sun Quan divided Liu Biao's inheritance. As for the conflict between Liu Bei and Sun Quan, that was a story for another time. In any case, all three sides gained something. The most unlucky one was Liu Biao. In this way, from July of the 13th year of Jian and to the 14th year of Jian, and a series of wars triggered by Cao Cao's forces heading south formed the historical Battle of Red Cliffs. The burning of Red Cliffs could be said to be the turning point of the entire battle. With this as a node, The entire Battle of Red Cliffs could be divided into the early, middle, and late stages. Currently, no one knew how far Gaia had progressed in this battle. No matter what, no matter which faction the Lord chose, it would be an evenly matched battle. This was Gaia's highest principle. After the system announcement ended, the territories qualified to participate in the battle immediately began their preparations. Some of them had been looking forward to this battle for a long time. For example, Di Chun, Lord Chunshin, and the others had long wanted to use this battle to be promoted to a first-rank marquis and then upgrade their territory to a third-rank county. Apart from that, the Battle of the Three Kingdoms had a different meaning to some of the lords. Influenced by the romance of the Three Kingdoms, the generals and strategists in it had many fans. For example, Zhao Yun, Zhuge Liang, and Guo Jiao were all super popular players. Although Ouyang Shuo was not affected by the romance of the Three Kingdoms, he also had admirable strategists and generals that he wanted to take under his command. It could be foreseen that in the upcoming Battle of Red Cliffs, the battle on the battlefield was only one aspect. In the battle for historical talents, the lords would probably give it their all. The first choice placed in front of the lords was to choose a faction, Cao Cao's or Sun Lu's. Ouyang Shuo did not hesitate and immediately chose Cao Cao's faction. Firstly, Xiahou Ying, the head of the General Administration of Military Affairs, was the ancestor of Xiahou Dun and Xiahou Yuan in Cao Cao's faction. Strictly speaking, he was even Cao Cao's ancestor. Why? The Chao family and the Xiahou family were both large clans in Pei County, Xiao County. Since Chao Teng, the Chao family had prospered and many of them had become high-ranking officials in the imperial court and counties. In history, Cao Cao's surname should have been Xiahou, but his father became Chao Teng's adopted son, so he changed his surname to Chao. Although the Xiahou family was large, none of their ancestors had ever been an official. They could only be considered a local landlord, not an official. They could not compare to the Chao family's influence in the imperial court. In order to develop their influence, the Xiahou family gradually moved closer to the Chao family. Although the Chao family relied on Chao Teng as a eunuch to rise to power, they had a good reputation among the scholarly officials and were not arrogant in their hometown. The two brothers, Xiahou Dun and Xiahou Yuan, took a fancy to Cao Cao, who had a good reputation among the scholarly officials. At that time, Cao Cao resigned and stayed at home, so Xiahou Dun and Xiahou Yuan became friends with him. Cao Cao had violated the law, so Xiahou Yuan was imprisoned in his place. Cao Cao actively rescued Xiahou Yuan. From then on, the relationship between the two families grew closer. Xiahou Yuan even married Cao Cao's sister-in-law, and the two of them became brothers-in-law. Therefore, when Cao Cao raised his troops in Chunlu, Xiahou Dun and Xiahou Yuan were the first to join him. The two brothers were able to obtain high positions in Cao Cao's faction not only because of their blood relationship with Cao Cao, but also because of their talents. Although Xiahou Dun was not good at war, he was outstanding in politics. He had guarded Cao Cao's rear many times and led the army to block the Taisho River. He built a small pond to irrigate the fields, benefiting the common people. Moreover, Xiahou Dun was a frugal person, so all the rewards he received were distributed to the soldiers. He did not own any property his entire life, so he died without any wealth. It would not be an exaggeration to say that Xiahou Dun was Cao Cao's #1 subordinate. Throughout his life, Cao Cao had placed him in an important position and trusted him greatly. Compared to Xiahou Dun, Xiahou Yuan was an outstanding military commander. Cao Cao once praised him as a genius who excelled in mobile warfare. Xiahou Yuan had participated in all of Cao Cao's campaigns and was often sent to quell rebellions. His most outstanding campaign was against Han Sui. Han Sui's subordinates were mostly from the Di and Chang tribes, and they were very elite. Xiahou Yuan had traveled a long distance and ambushed Han Sui's rear. When Han Sui came to his rescue, Xiahou Yuan decisively defeated Han Sui with a fatigued army that did not have an advantage in quality or quantity. From then on, Han Sui suffered a crushing defeat and could only wait to be destroyed. Moreover, Compared to Xiahou Dun, Xiahou Yuan was more tyrannical and had once massacred city. The two brothers could be considered the pillars of Cao Cao's faction, and their status was much higher than the five generals. With this relationship, it was easy to imagine how much authority Ouyang Shuo had in front of Cao Cao. The second reason Ouyang Shuo chose Cao Cao's faction was because Cao Cao's navy was relatively weak. If Shanghai City's navy was placed in the era of the Three Kingdoms, it would be an invincible existence. The two complemented each other, and Shanghai City was practically invincible. Chapter 692. In this battle, Ouyang Shuo only informed his allies of his choice of faction. As for what Bai Hua and the rest chose, Ouyang Shuo neither asked nor interfered. At this point, everyone had their own ideas. According to the rules, a first-grade marquis could lead 50,000 troops. As for the higher-ranked duke, there was no limit to the number of troops they could bring. But there was one rule. Each lord could not bring more than 100,000 troops. It was equivalent to Gaia drawing a red line. Even so, compared to the 20,000 troops of a second-grade marquis, 100,000 troops was an absolute advantage. This also meant that after being promoted to duke, Ouyang Shuo no longer needed the help of allies. 100,000 troops and 3,000 divine martial guards were naturally needed. Other than that, there was also the ocean-going fleet that was still repairing in the base city. According to the rules of the battle teleportation, there was no longer a need to use the territory teleportation array to teleport troops. As long as the lords specified the troops, they could be teleported anywhere. As such, Ouyang Shuo had used the system's rules to use an invincible great summoning spell to directly teleport the ocean-going fleet that was thousands of miles away to the battle map. After the battle, they would be teleported back to North Seaport. The ocean-going fleet was ultimately the first formation of the North Bay Fleet. However, according to the rules of the battle, the number of troops a lord could bring was calculated by the number of people. In other words, the 3,000-plus crew members of the ocean-going fleet would also be counted as 100,000. As such, the ocean-going fleet alone had used up 25,000 spots. Ouyang Shuo did not intend to conscript all the navy. Who knew how far Gaia had pushed the Battle of Red Cliffs? The role of the army in the battle map could not be ignored. As for the remaining spots, Ouyang Shuo left them to the city guards who were still fighting in Heartstone City. After withstanding the expansion of Handan City, the situation in Heartstone City had stabilized. There was no longer a need for the city guards to be stationed there. Besides, the city guards still needed to hold down the fort in Lianzhou Basin, so they could not be away for too long. Up until now, although the city guard army had suffered casualties from time to time, they had long been replenished by prisoners of war. The extra prisoners of war were directly sent to Heartstone City. The current Heartstone City had already formed an organized field army. In addition, there was also a field army being formed, with half of the soldiers already gathered. Heartstone City's current military strength was even stronger than Lingxi City's. In Baiyan's words, "We were forced." Oppressed by Handan City, Lao Ai had no choice but to embark on the path of militarism. The City Guard Corps played the role of escort well, helping Heartstone City get through the most difficult time. There are two reasons why Ouyang Shuo chose to conscript the City Guard Corps. Firstly, the City Guard Corps couldn't be compared to the past, and their overall combat strength wasn't inferior to the other corps. Secondly, it was to save a sum of teleportation fees. According to the usual procedure, it would cost the city guards 70,000 gold coins to teleport back to Shanghai City. Apart from that, Ouyang Shuo had another plan. Over the past 6 months, through Lao Ai, Shanghai City had purchased 70,000 elite Mongolian warhorses from the Mongolian tribes. This alone had cost a whopping 700,000 gold coins. Through the map, he could easily transport the warhorses back to Shanghai City, saving him a lot of trouble. Ouyang Shuo directly gave up on the remaining 2,000 people from the City Guard Corps. It would be too boring to transfer another 2,000 soldiers from the other legions. After choosing his faction and army, Ouyang Shuo had nothing else to prepare. Their only preparation was to inform Xiahou Ying to follow the army into battle. During this period, an interesting incident occurred. Zhang Liao of Lingxi City and Zhu Sheng of Black Lion City belonged to the Three Kingdoms. According to the rules, they couldn't enter the map. This gave Bai Hua and the Siege Lion a huge headache. These two were the pillars of their army. If they couldn't bring them to the map, they would suffer heavy losses. It was the same for Hua Xiong of Azura City. Kai Mao of Shanghai City also couldn't participate in the battle. However, Kai Mao was a member of the Cliff Mountain Fleet, so Ouyang Shuo didn't plan on letting Kai Mao participate in the battle. These generals and strategists wouldn't appear on the map either. Of course, Su Huang, who had been killed by Ouyang Shuo in the Battle of Giant Deer, wouldn't appear on the map. In short, the people of the Three Kingdoms who had appeared in the wilderness had no fate with this battle. Gaia 3rd year, August 28th, 9 a.m., the system announcement punctually rang. System announcement, 208 AD, 13th year of Jianan, Sun Quan and Liu Bei defeated Cao Cao's army at the Red Cliffs of the Yangtze River, laying the foundation for the Three Kingdoms. Sun Quan and Liu Bei defeated Cao Cao's army with fire. Cao Cao returned north. Sun Quan and Liu Bei each seized a part of Jing province. The sixth epic battle, Battle of Red Cliffs, officially begins. The 3,000 Divine Guards were in formation on the plaza, ready to set off. Checking the battle requirements, selecting the participating troops, choosing the faction. Ouyang Shuo was already familiar with this series of actions. However, he encountered a small problem when selecting the participating troops. Because this was the first time Gaia was sending a navy into the map, they had to scan all the battleships of the ocean-going fleet and send them into the map. As such, the workload was quite heavy. Fortunately, Ouyang Shuo had sent letters to Zheng He and Eli before the battle, informing them of their participation in the battle, so that they could prepare in advance. Otherwise, they might really fall into chaos. System notification, begin teleportation. After a short moment of dizziness, Ouyang Shuo and his party appeared in the Red Cliffs battlefield. System notification, welcome player who says nothing has arrived at Cao Cao's faction's headquarters, River Tomb City. River Tomb? Ouyang Shuo's face was filled with doubt. Could it be that we are still in the early stages of the battle? Before the battle began, it was necessary to introduce the military strength of both sides, as well as the main generals and strategists. Cao Cao had a total military strength of 150 to 60,000, while the Jing State Army had 70 to 80,000. However, it was impossible for the Jing State Army to be deployed to the front lines. Chaoren still had at least 30,000 troops stationed in River Tomb, so the frontline forces were still around 180,000. Cao Cao's army was mainly divided into two armies, Cao Cao's main army and Zhao Yan's and Chengyu's armies. Cao Cao's main army was spread out in Wulin and Red Cliffs. The Navy and land forces advanced side by side, with the Navy being the main force. Their total military strength was about 100,000. Cao Cao's generals included the super bodyguard Su Chu, Cao Zhen, Cao Xiu, and Cao Hong, the three Tiger Leopard Cavalry and Imperial Guard commanders, as well as Li Jin, Man Chong, Cao Chun, and Wen Pin. The strategists accompanying the army were Jia Su, Sun Yu, Chun Kun, Dong Zhao, Cui Yin, and Mao Jie. As for the ghost genius Guijia, he was long dead. On the other side, Zhao Yin was in charge of guarding the army. Eugene, Zhang He, Zhu Ling, Li Jian, Lu Zhao, Feng Kai, and the rest of the 7 armies, together with Cheng Yu's army, totaled about 70 to 80,000 soldiers. Zhao Yin's troops did not move together with Cao Cao's headquarters. Instead, they followed the route that Liu Bei and Guan Yu used to escape to Xiakou. That was to say, they marched along the Han River. Their corps was north of Cao Cao's headquarters. At this time, Cao Cao's army was filled with famous generals, but his strategists were slightly weaker. As for the allied army of Sun and Liu, they had fewer soldiers. Because Liu Bei was defeated at Dangyang, he only had about 10,000 soldiers with him. Liu Bei and Liu Qi's 10,000 soldiers met up at Xiakou. After forming an alliance with Sun Quan, Zhou Yu and Cheng Pu led 30,000 soldiers to join forces with Liu Bei. Guan Yu, Zhang Fei, Zhao Yun, and Zhuge Liang were all in Liu Bei's army. It should be noted that Guan Yu was currently the commander of the navy in Liu Bei's army. The Wu army had Zhou Yu and Cheng Pu as its left and right governors, while the other generals included Lu Su, Huang Gai, Han Dang, Lu Ming, Gan Ning, Ling Tong, and Zhou Tai. If this was truly the early stages of the war, it would be too advantageous for Cao Cao's camp. With the player's warning, Zhou Yu's burning Red Cliff would not work. Coupled with Shanghai City's navy, Ouyang Shuo was confident that he could end the war within a week and defeat the allied army of Sun and Lu in one fell swoop. The more he thought about it, the more Ouyang Shuo refused to believe it. He refused to believe that Gaia would disrupt the balance of the war so easily. "Greetings, my lord." Just as Ouyang Shuo was feeling doubtful, a thunderous voice rang out beside his ear. He turned around and saw that it was the commander of the city guards, East Lieutenant General Eli. After not seeing each other for half a year, the two of them were filled with emotions. Behind Eli, 70,000 city guards were lined up neatly. When they saw Ouyang Shuo looking over, they immediately bowed. "Greetings, my lord." Their voices were forceful and imposing. Such a formation attracted the attention of the other mutant armies that were teleported over. Some were fearful, some were envious, some were jealous, and some were happy. They were happy that they had chosen the same side as Shanghai City. As for Zheng He's fleet, it was likely that they had appeared on the surface of the Han River. After all, Ouyang Shuo's current location was in a military camp outside of Jiangling City. It was impossible for him to place the navy there. After meeting up with the City Guard Corps, Ouyang Shuo suppressed the doubts in his heart and went to register. Along the way, they met up with their allies who had chosen Cao Cao's side. In the end, only Bai Hua, Feng Xiuhuang, and Lao Ai chose to join Cao Cao's faction. The dragon-seeking acupuncture point and the siege lion had both chosen Sun Lu's camp. Ouyang Shuo sighed in his heart when he saw this, but he didn't reveal anything on his face. Bai Hua and the others had ugly expressions on their faces. After the registration, Ouyang Shuo was most concerned about how the war had progressed. If he didn't figure this out, he wouldn't be able to come up with a plan. Ouyang Shuo's mood instantly fell to the bottom of the valley when he heard the reply of the garrison general. "Our main force has already suffered a great defeat at the Red Cliffs. We are now temporarily reorganizing in Jiangling." As soon as he finished speaking, the entire camp was shaken. "Are you kidding me? The Battle of Chibi has already ended. So why did you drag us here?" "That's right. Are you trying to send him to the enemy camp?" Voices of dissatisfaction could be heard continuously. The overlords of Cao Cao's faction had already given up all hope before the war even started. Even though Shanghai City had chosen to join Cao Cao's faction, it didn't give them the slightest bit of confidence. Gaia's arrangement was truly out of everyone's expectations. You're tuning into the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.